Well, hello there. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Simba's Twin, the Lion King, Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Third POV. Evening painted the sky in long amber strokes as the sun slipped low across the plains. The tall grasses wavered in the wind like breathing earth, whispering across Zuri's flanks as she crept forward. Her paws pressed into the soil with the grace of habit. There was a reedbuck nearby. The wind occasionally told her that much. She'd caught its scent minutes ago, but they would disappear quickly with the slightest change in the wind. Which is why lions did not just rely on their sense of smell but also knew how to track their prey. Zuri did just that as she observed the ground below. She saw the footprints and bent grass. Judging by the pace and number of tracks, it was a lone and male. The bigger males usually had longer strides than females, so that was the clue. She glanced to the side, where another beast accompanied her. Leo. She thought he was behind her. She didn't hear him approach, didn't see him move through the grass. He was a perfect stalker. Found it, it's a reedbuck, she said, but didn't say anything further when she saw the knowing look on his face. Whatever she discovered, he already knew. It was likely that he had led her here, already knowing that a reedbuck was around this place. Since Scar stole the reedbuck he brought home for her, they decided to hunt another one together when they had the chance. Well, she was always ready and willing to hunt with him, but he was the one to decide when. Today was that day. It was not often that they would be alone together like this, so she was finding it hard to focus if she was being honest. Her eyes were always on him as they tracked their prey. She felt the quiet shift in the air whenever he moved, the way birds stayed still when he passed. He was heavy against the earth, he had to be, with a frame like his. Every muscle in his shoulders was visible even under fur, and those shoulders rose higher than most lions in the pride. And yet, somehow, the weight didn't slow him. It just made him grounded, like it was impossible to move him when he did not want to. Each of his steps was deliberate. His forelimbs flexed like drawn bows as he crouched into the undergrowth, and the sheer mass of him seemed to fold into the land without a sound. The muscles along his back rippled, and Zuri saw again how different he was from the others. He didn't stalk like a lion. He stalked like something else, something shaped by necessity, by pain and discipline, not just instinct. His hind legs were always more coiled, his center of gravity lower, his paws splayed just slightly to spread the pressure. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't instinctive. It was measured, it was intended. There was a difference. A difference that became wider the more you observed and compared. After a few minutes of tracking, the reedbuck finally came into view near the dry riverbed. Its figure was lanky, twitchy, with ears perked. It grazed nervously, hooves shifting in the dirt. There, she whispered and hid between the grass. The wind's in our favor, Leo whispered back. Then he moved away from her, flanking the prey from the right. Careful, she said while she stayed lower and waited for an opportunity. Leo almost scoffed at her words. Zuri watched him go, and she was struck by how quietly violent his silhouette looked at a distance. His body cut a shape into the world instead of the other way around. His mane was not fully grown, but already thick around the neck. Her eyes fell on the tail behind him, or at least what remained of a tail. It was short, like the size of a hyena's. It had looked awkward at first, but now it perfectly suited his unique build. That made her recall that fateful day when they had wandered too far and broken a rule they shouldn't have. Leo had borne the consequences of their collective mistake that day. While everyone ran away from the leopard, he had turned and fought. She never quite forgot the sight. She saw his back, standing between her and what her young mind could only describe as death-given form. It was ridiculous to think about even now. A cub no older than half a year, but he had roared and fought like any adult. She remembered the blood that covered his whole body when she saw him again. She remembered the silence of his arrival. How he didn't cry. Instead, he was almost glowing with pride. For he had won and protected her cowardly self. A flick of grass snapped her back to reality. The reedbuck raised its head. Zuri shifted forward. She was 30 paces from the prey, and the wind was downwind, so she slowly approached. But before she could pounce, Leo beat her to it. He moved in a blur. He didn't leap like how you would expect. He didn't push himself off with only his hind legs. Instead, 4 of his limbs grabbed the earth, and he propelled himself forward with maximum force. It would be better to say he launched himself, and the ground beneath him buckled when he moved. It wasn't a silent pounce like any other lion would do. It didn't need to be. The reedbuck barely had time to turn. Leo crashed into it mid-sprint with a force that sounded like trees breaking. They tumbled in a blur, and he twisted mid-fall. He slammed a massive forepaw into the buck's shoulder. There was a snap of bone. Dust flew and hid the scene from her eyes, and then nothing. Silence. Zuri broke into a jog, emerging from the grass just as Leo rose from the kill. He wasn't breathing heavily. His chest rose deeply and steadily like a furnace. One paw still rested atop the reedbuck's neck, pinning down in case it tried to escape. The way he hunted was excessively brutal in her eyes. He didn't even give hope to the prey. Simply overpowered it to the point of bottomless despair and drowned it under raw strength. In the end, Zuri didn't have to do anything. She didn't even get to show off in front of him. "Are you good?" she asked. Leo nodded, shaking out his thick shoulders. You could see the way his muscles relaxed and stopped pushing against his tight skin. Shoulders broader than any lion she knew, and paws that were massive and careful in how they stepped back. He looked like something time had carved, not something nature gave birth to. Like he had been built to dominate, protect, and provide. It was a thought that brewed at the corner of her mind, but she would love to have his cubs. It was an instinctive urge to multiply what she believed to be the most suited lion. Wouldn't everything be so much better if there were more than one Leo? Tiny Leos, whom she would nurture to become just like their father. That would be an incredible way to spend the rest of her life. "What are you waiting for? Let's eat," she said with a bit of excitement oozing off her. Reedbucks were her favorites after all. But she didn't start eating. She was waiting for the dominant one and the killer of the prey to take the first bite. That was tradition, an unspoken law. He lowered his head and began opening the carcass. She watched impatiently as he tore open the inside of the prey. But instead of taking the first bite, he pulled back with a bloody mouth and gestured to her. "Go on, you eat first." "Ha!" she blinked. "I'm already quite full, so you can eat first," he repeated. And there he goes again, she thought to herself. How someone could be so different from their own species, she didn't know. No lion would ever give up the first bite, even if it was to their own offspring. It fascinated her to no end. Maybe if she grew a baby Leo inside her and raised it, she would get close to understanding him. Regardless, she would not refuse such goodwill. She moved around the carcass and began eating the juicy organs of the prey. Leo joined her after a while and they both shared a meal under the sunset. First POV. 2 years old. Another 6 months slipped by in the blink of an eye. Time moved strangely in this world, faster in some ways, slower in others. Yet my growth was equally relentless. Through intense training and a diet that could only be described as gluttonous, I had forged a body that defied nature's timeline. By the time I turned 2, I had already grown to the size of a fully matured male lion. What would take others 5 to 6 long years of gradual progress, I had achieved in less than half the time. I really should not be this big at my age. It was not just my size either. My frame was broader than other males, my limbs were thick with muscle, and my bones carried a heaviness that gave weight to each step I took. My build was turning more tiger-like than the awkward design of a lion. The scariest part about it all was that I still have yet to be fully grown. A normal lion generally grows for 5 or 6 years, which meant I had at least 3 more years of progress ahead of me. I couldn't even imagine what kind of beast I would become at that age. Perhaps I could become twice the size of any other male lion, easily dwarfing the likes of Mufasa in his prime. That was not really outrageous in my mind when I take into account my technical training and my diet. Even among humans of the same species, the world's strongest man could be up to 3 times the size of the average man of the same race and species. My only limit would be my genetics. Other than the growth of my body mass, my mane had grown in, too. While it lacked the thickness and royal fullness of an elder lion's, it was a complete mane nonetheless. Strands of dark fur framed my face like a burning halo, slowly shifting in hue with each passing moon. The warm browns of my cubhood were giving way to something deeper, darker, and more intense. I had once wondered if I would grow up to resemble my father, the great golden lion who once ruled over the Pride Lands. But it seemed that golden radiance was not meant for me. Which kinda sucked since I thought Mufasa looked really cool and majestic and would love to look like him. Instead of gold, my mane darkened with every surge of testosterone that coursed through my veins because apparently, more testosterone resulted in darker manes. I unfortunately started resembling Scar when it came to my mane. And there was nothing I could do about it. On another topic, the promised drought from my memories had not struck the Pride Lands yet. The rivers still flowed, the trees still bore fruit, and prey still roamed the plains in satisfying numbers. Life was, by all appearances, stable. Peaceful even. We were still thriving and living in abundance. That made me thoughtful about the exact time gap between Simba running away and returning to the Pride Lands. According to the events I remembered, Simba had been fully grown when he returned to challenge Scar for the throne. He was bigger than Scar, even. That would require at least 6 years of natural growth for Simba. Which meant the climax of the story was still 4 years away at least. The drought would come maybe 2 years before that. That means Simba and his friends were singing Hakuna Matata for almost 6 years, I said with a chuckle. My voice came out rough due to the prey I was holding between my jaw. The afternoon sun beat down on my back as I trotted toward Pride Rock with a half-eaten zebra. It was not late, the sun would take 3 or 4 more hours to set. I had eaten my fill, but the rest I carried home, dragging it across the savannah. You might be wondering for whom I was doing this. It was not for Scar, not for the lioness, not even for Zuri. It was for the cubs. And by cubs, I meant the newest addition to the Pride. They had become old enough to finally eat meat, but recently, food had been a bit scarcer for them. Not because of a lack of prey, but because the hyenas had grown bolder. They often lingered at the edge of our feasting grounds, waiting for scraps and eating everything before the cubs had enough time to eat their fill. They would not die of hunger because of it, but they were not full, and I couldn't accept that. I was the older brother after all, and I wanted them to sleep with full bellies. Whether they were Scar's offspring didn't matter to me. Bloodlines were irrelevant when they looked at me with wide, innocent eyes, and tripped over their own paws. I think I've said this before, but lion cubs were absolutely adorable. They were literally kittens, and I've come to cherish them. The air grew warmer as I approached the den. It was the perfect hour to return. Scar usually spent this time patrolling the borders of the Pride Lands, and as you could have guessed, I was avoiding him. We weren't on good terms, to put it lightly. In fact, we hadn't been for some time now. The tension between us had first flared 6 months ago when I disappeared for 3 days, and it hadn't simmered since. In fact, the tension between us had only grown. We were like dry grass and flint, a spark away from a wildfire. Every look he gave me was tinged with suspicion. Every word he said to me came with a warning hidden beneath. 2-year-old male lions were at the prime time of being kicked out of the Pride. I was trying my best to delay the inevitable. But as I climbed the rocky path that led to the den, I caught the scent of Scar. I stopped immediately, wondering why he had not gone for his usual patrol. I stood there for a moment, contemplating whether to go in anyway or go out into the wild and wait for him to leave the den. But my moment of contemplation was broken when I heard a scuffle from inside. Scar's roar of annoyance was distinctive, but Zuri's angry growls were even more so. I dropped the zebra and ran to the entrance of the den immediately. My presence was welcomed with a beat of silence as everyone inside the den turned to me. On the other hand, my entire focus was on Scar, who was putting his paw on Zuri's open belly. She was lying on her back, her ears were pinned back to show aggression. She was baring her teeth and claws at the king, but you could tell that she was in a losing position. I could already smell it in the air, but the flash of Scar's junk was enough to give context to the situation. Ha! Surprisingly, I was eerily calm for a moment as I assessed the situation. Zuri was my age, only 2 years old. And females reach their sexual maturity at around 3 or 4 years. So why would Scar try to mate with her? On one hand, it could be that Scar, in all his villainy, was a pedophile. On another hand, it could be because of me. Zuri and I were very close, even among the Pride. Everyone knew that. And recently, we had been going hunting together or wandering off together more often than other times. Scar was likely threatened by that, and he was wondering if she had already reached maturity and had been mating with me. Plus, he wanted to assert his dominance over me and mate with a lioness I fancy. Regardless of the reason, this was unacceptable. He was trying to take what was mine. I wanted to delay this. I thought in my mind, But that line of thought disappeared really quickly as anger surged from the deepest depths of my soul. The eerie calm was gone in seconds as rage consumed me. And I did not try to stop my anger this time, I embraced it. Scar was able to match my energy in seconds. It almost seemed like he was waiting for me, like he was planning for this exact scenario. That was odd. But it was too late for coherent thoughts. Two beasts collided. Fang for fang. Claw for claw. The battle for dominance began abruptly. Third POV. Scar lay at the top of Pride Rock, overlooking his entire kingdom. His giant frame shimmered under the afternoon sun while his gaze was stuck on the horizon. His thoughts were not idle as he waited for Leo to appear in the distance. Even now, just thinking about his name left a bitter taste in his mouth, like the rotten flesh he used to eat long ago. That abomination of a cub. Or not, he was not a cub anymore. He was a behemoth in a young body, a freak of nature molded by hardships. Scar had let him grow too strong and tolerated his existence for too long. Now the young lion walked through the Pride Lands like he owned the place. And a few of the lionesses watched him with hope. That was unacceptable to Scar. It disgusted him. He was not even of his blood. Not of his will. And yet, day by day, he grew more confident, more capable, more adored. It could continue no longer. He had considered the traditional route of letting him live for a few more months before finally exiling him, as was how things should be. But Scar was fully aware that he could not do such things. He needed to kill Leo, and he needed to do it now. If Leo was allowed to live longer, even if he were exiled, he would only return a year or two later and fight for the throne. That was completely unacceptable. Scar was determined to enjoy the throne for as long as he lived. At the same time, Scar could not just outright attack Leo and kill him. That was not the way things were supposed to be. That would cause instability among the Pride as they questioned the legitimacy of his rule. Unlike what most people believed, Scar did not want to be a dictator and be hated by the Pride. He wanted to rule rightfully, at least on the outside. Therefore, he needed to make different plans. The only way he could earn the right to kill Leo would be if the young cub attacked him first. That would mean Leo was trying to kill the king, and Scar would have every right to fight back and even kill. Although Leo had grown big and strong, he was still too green in Scar's opinion. Leo was still smaller than Scar since the king was much bigger than the average male lion. Scar also had experience over Leo, so he was confident in his chances of winning. The only question was how he was going to get Leo to attack him. The young lion was too smart and clever for his own good. He would never strike the king, knowing the consequences. Unless he had a good reason. A reason that Scar would give in full. It was almost too easy. Everyone knew about the lioness Zuri and the relationship she shared with Leo. She was barely of age, but Scar was not blind. He had been young once, he had been in love once. He knew full well the tragic pain of seeing the person you love be owned by someone. He had once witnessed Sarabi being taken away from him by Mufasa, and that was about the worst pain he ever felt. The rage almost drove him mad. Nothing could hurt a lion more. And so he waited. He waited on the Pride Rock and looked into the horizon. It was about the usual time for Leo to return. The king did not have to wait long before he saw a figure appear on the far ridge. Leo was returning with prey clamped between his teeth. "Perfect," Scar said with a sinister smirk spreading across his face. He stood and made his way into the den where Zuri rested among the others. When he entered the cave, she noticed him immediately. She was guarded, lying a little isolated from the rest of the Pride. She was not afraid at first, but simply observed him. But that changed quickly when Scar made his way towards her. "You've grown beautifully, Zuri," Scar began with low chuckles. Zuri pushed herself up and tried to escape, but he did not give her any opening. Slowly but surely, he approached her and cornered her. Scar made his intention clear after he confronted her. He did not have to say it outright, but his body language and his low demanding growl were enough. Zuri bared her teeth and unfurled her claws when Scar tried to sniff her there. She was extremely hostile when she realized his aim. She was prepared to fight to the death. Lions did not have the same perspective towards loyalty and cheating when they were in a relationship. The king owned them. Regardless of their feelings, they had to bear his cubs. In any other scenario, even if one lioness was fond of a young male in the Pride, she would not reject the king. She would not even consider that she was doing something wrong. That was just how their instincts were. But Zuri was different. She had spent too much time with Leo, and she learned from him that to mate with any other male than him was unacceptable, even if it was the king. And besides, she never considered herself to be Scar's. In the deepest part of her heart, she knew she was his. She was Leo's female. So she reacted as if another king besides her own was trying to mate her. There was a lot of growling, a lot of clawing and wrestling. Scar overpowered her, but he couldn't exactly force himself on her either. But that was fine for the king. He was really only doing it for the image rather than actual desire. He was merely cloaking cruelty with instinct. Scar set the stage perfectly, with his paws on her belly and her tail shielding her privates. He made sure she struggled and looked as helpless as possible. He made sure her snarls echoed just loud enough, her call for help reaching outside. No one inside the den tried to stop him because technically, he was not doing anything wrong by trying to mate with his female. He was not crossing any line, therefore, they did not really care. But the only lion who cared finally appeared. His presence was undeniable to everyone. Leo was large and big enough that although they might not see, hear, or smell him, their instinct screamed in his presence. A primal instinct that warned them of a threat that could kill them. Everyone turned except Scar. He painted a more vivid picture for the young lion. He made sure Leo saw how she was pinned beneath him, made sure he could see his intent, and the exposed desire he didn't really feel. Only then did he turn. And he saw exactly what he wanted to see on Leo's face. Rage was twisting his young face into something feral. Oftentimes, rage was the death of intelligence and reason. Leo didn't speak. He charged almost immediately, and Scar could barely hide his smile. Leo attacked the king. He crossed the line and abandoned the law of the pride. Now Scar could kill. He lunged at the young cub that used to visit his lonely cave a long time ago, now grown. Two beasts collided. And only one would live by the end. Two beasts collided in the rawest display of aggression. Scar stood tall on his hind legs to build momentum while Leo stayed low for better center of gravity. Leo slammed into Scar like a thunderclap, sending him flying away as they both crashed into the cave wall with a dull boom that echoed across the den. Zuri scrambled out of the way just in time, her eyes wide with fear and awe as the two lions collided. The rest of the pride scattered, a flurry of growls and yelps, instinctively fleeing to the walls or outside the cave. The air was thick with tension and bloodlust. Two apex predators going at each other. It was unlike when hunting prey, where they did it out of necessity with the intention of a swift kill. This fight was deeply personal, and the aim was to hurt each other and make them submit. Leo's brute force was fueled by rage. His mind had no clarity at the moment, so there was no planning or strategizing. His massive shoulders rolled and he clawed into Scar's side. His swing was stronger than it had any right to be due to his adaptation. The sheer force drove the older lion back into the wall. Scar snarled and replied with a vicious swipe of his own. But unlike Leo, who used force, Scar focused on precision and his claws. His claws found Leo's muzzle and drew blood. But Leo did not so much as flinch. Instead, he sank his teeth into Scar's mane-covered neck and yanked hard, tearing out a tuft of fur and skin. Scar let out a furious roar and rolled, slamming Leo onto the rocky ground of the den. Dust swirled and the fragile parts of the stones broke off beneath their combined weight. The first part of the battle was driven by rage from both sides, so it was far from a fight of graceful dominance. Instead, it was a savage, primal brawl. A war of flesh and instinct. The den vibrated with the noise of battle. Both lions produced deep growls that could shake the bones of others. The lionesses formed a loose circle and witnessed the battle. They roared and growled but did not interfere. Nala shielded the younger cubs behind her while Sarabi watched with worried eyes. Scar raised his paw and brought it down on Leo's chest like a whip, aiming for the throat. Leo twisted, clawing at Scar's exposed belly. Their roars mixed, low, guttural, bone-deep sounds that did not resemble language. It was the speech of predators. Scar's strength was monstrous, and he was bigger than Leo, who was already the size of the average male lion. But Leo could compete with Scar on equal ground using his trained muscles and unique build. Scar slammed Leo this time into the rock wall, cracking it behind him. Leo gasped, having the air knocked out of his lungs. He dodged a jaw full of teeth, and the sound of Scar's teeth clashing made a loud snapping sound. Once, twice, And then Leo learned the rhythm, so he lunged at Scar's throat while he pulled back. Leo clamped down on thick mane, barely touching skin. The mane of lions evolved precisely to protect the vitals, and it did its job. But Leo did not need to get a bite to do damage. He twisted his head and tugged as hard as he could. It was a similar motion to snapping a prey's neck, a move he practiced hundreds of times. Scar lost his balance and was flung sideways. Before he could recover, Leo used both paws to shove him down on the ground. Leo successfully mounted him and delivered lethal attacks. Claws and teeth sliced and tore at each other in a brutal fight for dominance. At that moment, Scar finally realized how big Leo's paws were and how much weight they pressed down. He felt like he was being pinned down by a mountain. The only thing he could do was reply to every attack that came down on him. But fortunately for the king, his hind legs found Leo's open belly. His claws sank into the softer tissue of the young lion, and Leo released a furious roar that held a tinge of agony. Scar pushed him off his body, but Leo grabbed Scar's face. His claws hooked on the already scarred face of Scar, causing the older lion to echo his roar of pain. They rolled across the den floor, slamming into stone. Growls and roars shattered the air as the lionesses scrambled out of the way. The two beasts thrashed. They were a storm of flesh and bone. It became evident that the place they were fighting in was too small and tight. They were also putting the cubs in danger, so Leo decided to move the fight into a more suitable environment. Leo had less mass than Scar, but he was broader and stronger in ways that were useful in a fight. His distinctive strong limbs controlled the flow of the fight, and he always ended up on top of Scar. The briefest pause of a moment, the slightest opening. That was all it took for Leo to open his jaw as wide as he could and clamp down on Scar's face. One of his canines successfully penetrated Scar's eye and plunged down for a deep and firm hook. Scar trembled violently. His body knew it had come extremely close to death. Then his tempo shifted in a chaotic fury like that of an angry cat. His limbs whipped around, full of claws, and managed several scratches on Leo. But the young lion paid no heed to surface injury. Instead, he clamped down even harder on his hold and dragged the king toward the entrance of the den. And then Leo threw the king outside. Scar was flung away, and he had a great fall down the rocky path of Pride Rock. On his last fall, he landed with a nasty thud amid the grassy plain. He remained unmoving for a while before he stood up groggily and quickly moved away while turning around. Leo, on the other hand, took a massive leap down the den. He covered almost 30 feet in distance and cleared 15 in height. But he landed with a deep thud and without a single injury. Ever since he was a cub, he had climbed trees and jumped down from them. His limbs were also unusually powerful to make up for his short tail. Due to these factors, he was able to achieve a feat seemingly impossible for other lions. Leo did not attack Scar immediately after he landed. Instead, he took that moment to circle the king. Scar only observed in his place. He dared not attack, for he was still spooked by how powerful Leo really was. He had completely underestimated how dangerous Leo was. This was not an easy fight where he could kill his opponent. Leo started laughing as he circled around Scar. In the beginning, he was driven by rage and instinct. But now he had a clear head, which made him even more dangerous. He finally had time to analyze the situation and also realize that Scar had baited him with his deed with Zuri. But he still laughed. Because guess what? Scar was far weaker than he ever expected. It made sense if you really thought about it. Scar was bigger, but he was mostly just fat. It had been more than a year since he even hunted properly. His hunting strategy was surrounding a herd with his hyenas and taking down a large prey with numbers. It had been a long time since his body moved at full potential to hunt. He had been softened by the easy life of his rule. On the other hand, Leo was the opposite. He had trained himself like a madman while eating more than anyone else. His body had also adapted to bursts of strength, as that was the best way to catch his prey. Bigger shoulders allowed for more powerful swings. Larger paws meant larger claws. His natural low stature made him almost immovable, while his stronger forelimbs meant greater power with each step. It almost seemed like nature had built him solely to fight. Even in bite force Scar could not compare. The king had been a picky eater. He ate only the softer and juicier organs and meat while he left the rest for others. Prey was abundant enough for him to live like that. On the other hand, Leo chewed on bones just to strengthen his bite force. All this culminated and made Leo the stronger lion, even though he was younger and still visibly smaller. "Look at him, he attacked the king and he found it amusing," Scar roared while trying to look powerful. But in reality, he felt like injured prey being circled by a predator. His eyes bled profusely, and he could taste his own blood. It tasted like fear. "You're so pathetic," Leo shut him down instantly. It was his honest reaction to seeing Scar trying to win over the Pride when he realized he couldn't win the fair fight. The Pride stood silent near the entrance of the den. Some of them climbed down to the rocky path to get a better view of the conflict. Leo was done circling, and he stalked forward slowly, nostrils flaring, powerful chest heaving. His eyes glowed with that light he usually had when he was about to ambush prey. Scar was left waiting in tension. His eyes locked on Leo's paw, fearing that each slow step would blur and launch him forward. But even while locking eyes, he never saw Leo coming because he pushed off with 4 limbs at the same time, a technique unlike anything Scar had ever seen before. But still, the king had pride, so with a roar of desperation mixed with wrath, he lunged toward Leo. He swung his forelimb, but Leo ducked under the swing and slammed his head into Scar's chest like a rhino. Lions were known to fight with claws and fangs, but Leo, with his human mind, had more than just that. He knew different ways to hurt his opponent. His moveset was not limited to claws and bites now that he had a clear mind. Scar jerked and clawed at Leo's back. The young lion continued pushing Scar back, and eventually, Scar bent his body and slammed his teeth at Leo's skull. But the growing dark mane protected Leo from the sharpness of the canines. Leo had been waiting for this moment, so with no wasted movement, he lowered himself and exploded upwards. His skull slammed against Scar's lower jaw. Every reasonable man knew hitting the jaw was a knockout. Unlike other lions who only knew how to cut, pierce or tear, Leo was very aware of the dangers of blunt force. The sound of bone smashing bone could be heard, and Scar experienced for the first time what it was like to be knocked out. He felt the world shifting and he fell on the ground with a thud. He regained consciousness quickly, but by that point Leo was already onto him again. Scar took a desperate position to fight back. It was the same position Zuri took when he tried to force himself on her. "If only I'd known how weak you are, I would have challenged you sooner," Leo said and lunged at Scar. The king lay on his back, teeth bared and claws unleashed. His position was a pure defensive position without an attacking capability. He was able to protect himself from the onslaught, but each second in that position was humiliation for the king. Scar's plan had backfired horribly. But then his salvation came from the mocking laugh of hyenas. Leo was too preoccupied with Scar so he didn't notice. 2 hyenas clammed down on his hind leg, causing him to roar in pain and quickly turn around to assess the situation. In that moment, Leo had another realization. Indeed, Scar had never been the strongest. In fact, he was always weak in terms of fighting. But what Scar lacked, he made up for in other, dirty ways. The battle was over. The war began. The battle was over, and the war began. Leo twisted violently, sinking his claws into the scruff of one hyena and slamming it into the other. They yelped, but more were already pouring in, shadows with teeth and laughter. Scar didn't rise to fight. He slithered back, rearranging his jaw by opening and closing. On the other hand, Leo was confronted by the hyena clan. They were 71 adults 1.5 years ago, but now they were 100 without counting the cubs. Much like the lions, the hyena clan had thrived under Scar's rule. Leo released deep roars that shook the air. His intimidation worked as the hyenas gathered around him without charging just yet. Leo had been bullying them for a whole year, and that caused them to have immense fear and hatred towards the young lion. But the hyenas were slowly drowning him in their sheer number, and soon enough, they would find the courage to attack, and Leo would not stand a chance against 100 hyenas. Zuri roared from outside the den, but the lionesses held her back. "Let me go," she roared and then turned toward Sarabi. "Help him." But she got no reply. Zuri felt her heart weigh heavily in her chest as she looked at Leo slowly being drowned by the number of hyenas. She was helpless. She didn't know what to do. "There is nothing we can do," Seraphina said. "This is a battle between lion kings. It is no place for a lioness to interfere." "What do you mean, Mom?" "Look at him. He is being attacked by the hyenas. Scar is using underhanded tactics. There is no fight here." Nala was quick to argue with her mother while stepping forward. Then what do you suggest we do? Serafina asked her daughter with a stern look. Help him, of course. Nala answered with a loud voice. If you run down and lead the charge, how many do you think will follow you? Serafina asked her daughter firmly. What do you mean? Nala asked, ears dropping as she looked around her. Zuri did the same, and they looked to the other members of the Pride one by one. There were only 3 who would have stepped forward in that moment, Nala, Zuri, and Sarabi. But from the looks on the faces of the others, it was clear. No one else would follow. They wouldn't step up to help Leo. And why would they? This was a battle between lions. It was a fight for dominance. Tradition said the lionesses had no place in it, and Scar had never asked for their help. In that way, he hadn't broken any rule. He played the game right, even though he played unfairly. The hyenas were outsiders, and nothing stopped a king from calling on allies if it was from outside the Pride. Just as 2 or 3 rogue males could join forces to take down a king, so too could a king call upon hyenas to aid him. Brutal and unfair? Yes. But not forbidden. As long as the Pride stayed out of it, it was allowed. But even beyond that, there was a deeper reason why the rest of the Pride wouldn't help. They were happy and satisfied under Scar's rule. They had a lazy and pleasurable lifestyle. And for the first time in years, the Pride was truly thriving and not just surviving. Barely any cubs had died due to the presence of Scar and his hyenas, and they were living the best life a lion could live. So why would they throw that away by joining Leo in a losing battle? Even if they rebelled against Scar, 100 hyenas was still too much for the Pride. So no one was willing to side with Leo, except for those 3 lionesses. It was just nature to look out for themselves instead of what is right. Leo was without help as he stood against Scar and 100 hyenas alone. This is not right. Please, this is not right, Nala said as they all gazed upon Leo moving away from the growing hyenas. I'm sorry, Nala, there is nothing we can do, Serafina said and rubbed her head on her daughter to console her. Leo continued to release roars and deep growls to intimidate any hyenas that came too close, but it was painfully obvious that his intimidation was not going to last long. Every second that passed, the hyenas grew bolder. Soon enough, they got bold enough to start snapping their jaws at Leo's blind side. The young lion knew that he was in deep trouble now, and his mind worked like a machine to find a way to survive the situation. He looked towards the den and at the Pride more than once, but after the 3rd time, he accepted that no one was coming to help him. In the movie, when Simba experienced the same situation, the females, along with other animals, came to help. But the situation was just not the same. The drought had not happened, which made the lionesses unsatisfied under Scar's rule, and Leo was not the fated crown prince of the Pride lands. So once more, Leo had to grit his teeth and save himself. His eyes turned wildly and searched for Scar. The moment he saw him, Leo immediately ran towards the older lion. If he were to kill Scar, then he hoped the rest of the Pride would accept him as the king and help. He swung at some bodies trying to stop him, and he lost the hyena clan easily with his immense burst of speed. Scar was prepared to meet him, and they both lunged at each other. They clashed midair and then fell on the dirt with a thud. Dust rose as they thrashed each other violently. Leo maintained his calm and used tactics to win the fight, not just instinct. Leo twisted his body and aimed his teeth at Scar's spine. The mane was too thick to penetrate, so he went for the open spine. But even so, a lion's hide was made to absorb such lethal attacks. The skin was not stuck to the meat, so it was flexible. Instead of biting through the spine, Leo clamped down on loose skin most of the time. The battle shifted. Instead of a frontal assault, both parties attacked each other's backs. They tried to bite the spine, tear the hind legs, or chew off the tail. Yes, tail. Scar tried but failed to catch Leo's shorter tail. On the other hand, Leo clamped down on Scar's moving tail and then tugged as hard as he could. Scar released a roar of fury and pain. Leo pulled Scar away with sheer power. Scar planted his paws on the ground, but his claws only left a helpless line as Leo began ragdolling him. Leo was not simply moving his neck to thrash Scar. Instead, he used his forelimbs to push and explode into power with a rhythmic pattern. Eventually, Scar slipped and fell on the ground. Leo took that chance to mount him and lunged at the neck. His jaw clamped down on thick, dark mane but also caught some flesh, enough to suffocate the opponent. But Leo would never have had enough time to suffocate him because time was not on his side. While he was occupied with Scar, 3 hyenas slammed into his side. Leo immediately released his jaw when he felt a snap in his ribs. He howled savagely in pain and anger as he shifted his focus to the hyenas. Scar took the chance to try and run away. He could no longer contend with Leo, especially now that he was blinded in one eye. His new blind eye was not only affecting him visually, but it was throwing off his whole balance and movement. He was just easy prey for Leo at that point. Leo swiped at the hyenas. He caught one at the side, and the hyena released painful puppy sounds and writhed on the ground. It was clear that one swing from Leo had broken his ribs and punctured organs. The other hyenas moved back immediately after that. Leo took that moment to explode toward Scar once more. He reached top speed in just a few bursts and caught up to him. His jaw clamped down on Scar's hind legs. This time, Scar did not release a roar but the closest thing a lion could produce to a fearful scream. He tugged fiercely, trying to escape Leo, but the young lion was clamping down like a crocodile. In the end, Scar escaped, but at the cost of tearing his muscles and leaving a chunk of meat in Leo's mouth. He quickly limped away, but before Leo could follow, more hyenas were on him. They jumped on his back and clamped down on his shoulder. Leo stood on his hind legs and roared before falling on his back and crushing the hyena with his weight. He quickly rolled over to not expose his open belly and fought with the other hyenas. They came like ocean waves, crashing into him from all sides. The longer they attacked, the bolder they got, and the intensity only increased. Leo swiped his arms again and again. His paw caught 3 hyenas at once and another swing felled 2 more. But where one hyena fell, 2 seemed to take its place. Leo kicked his hind legs to shield his back, and he would rotate quickly to leave no opening. But slowly but surely, he was being worn down. But by that point, Zuri could no longer simply watch. For the first time in years, something overrode the instinct to survive in an animal. Zuri came down and charged at the clan of hyenas. They were spooked. They howled and laughed as they dispersed before she could get most of them. She came towards Leo, clearing any hyenas that stopped her. The hyenas moved away and left them alone. The situation changed, and the clan circled around Leo and Zuri. Although one female was a small change to the outcome, the hyenas did not attack immediately. They contemplated and looked for openings. Leo's breathing was heavy and loud. The moment of reprieve was much needed, and he stared at Zuri for a moment. "Are you okay, Leo?" she asked with concern. First POV. Things were not looking too good for me. The only light in my situation was the lioness that stood protectively beside me. But she was only endangering herself in her attempt to stand up for me. 1 lion against 100 hyenas was dead. 2 lions against 100 hyenas were also dead. "Are you okay, Leo?" she asked. The small thing, only half my size, was asking me if I was okay or not. I should feel insulted or ashamed, but instead, my heart only pounded in my chest, less heavily. "I'm fine," I replied while catching my breath. "You shouldn't have come down, Zuri," I said with a tight jaw. "I know," was her only reply while she moved rapidly to protect all sides. "You should stay, you belong in the pride," I said and came to a decision right then and there. The situation gave me no time to second-guess myself. I made a mental plan in my mind and I did not include her there. I shouldn't and I wouldn't. "Are you going to run?" she asked and turned to me. "Are you going to run away? If so, take me with you." "No," was my reply. Her face broke and she looked at every part of my face, as if reading my expression because she didn't trust my words. "Why not?" She was only a teenager, not even an adult yet. I had a better chance escaping this alone than I did with her. I also did not want to put her in danger or risk her life. I did not need help, I only needed time. Because I knew exactly what I had to do. "Because I'll come back for you," I said and then touched her nuzzle with mine. "I promise, I'll come back," I said and I took a deep breath. I had gathered enough stamina for the upcoming task. I walked away from her while she was rooted to her spot. My eyes swept the land. I looked past all the spotted hyenas and locked my gaze on Scar hiding behind his little army. "Scar, I beg you," I roared. "Please live well and survive for the next 2 years," I said, and made a promise. After 2 years I shall return to take his life and everything he held dear. My eyes then shifted to Sarabi and Nala standing in front of the den. I hoped they saw the resolve in my eyes. I hoped they remain witness to my promise. Scar was weaker than me and I could already defeat him in a fair fight. But it was his army of hyenas that proved to be troublesome. I was not some main character that could summon reinforcement whenever I needed help. Fate was not going to help me by starting a great fire. In 2 years' time, I shall raise an army of my own and grow to my full potential. Scar, count your days. I turned abruptly and then ran towards the horizon. I heard a commotion behind me, the hyenas laughing at my retreating back while Zuri shouted something. Kill him. Don't let him run away. Scar roared in anger and panic. But he could not follow me with his injured hind legs. I was a blur of explosive speed and I created massive distance almost instantly. The hyenas followed behind me in waves. Their sheer number made them look like a shadow from a distance. But most of them didn't follow me for long. Such a number of hyenas was overkill to take down a tired, injured lion in the first place. The ones whom I gave a beating were the first to give up, thinking that I would be taken down even without their help. A few others followed soon and that continued the longer the chase went on. After almost 15 minutes later, only 20 or so hyenas were on my tail. But at that point, I was exhausted and fatigued. They don't give up, do they? I asked while looking behind me. Almost immediately I could tell why they wouldn't give up. Some of the hyenas I recognized as the ones I bullied the most. There was one in particular that stood out with his hairless small tail. I had bitten off his tail when he laughed at me. That hyena was one of the first hyenas I ever fought while I was young. I guess all the bullying finally came to bite me in the ass. But I did not regret anything. If I could travel back in time, I would bully them worse. I was no longer running but walking quickly. My mouth was open with my tongue hanging out as I sucked in greedy breaths. I was quickly overheating. Unlike humans that could sweat and cool down while running, most animals could not do the same. So I needed to rest or slow down soon before I die of heat stroke or heart failure. The hyenas behind me, on the other hand, were faring a little than me. Mostly because they didn't have a fight against Scar like me and because hyenas were more suited for a marathon than lions. But it didn't matter as I had reached the place I was aiming for. Ever since the beginning, I did not run in a random direction. Years of training and exploring taught me exactly what I needed to do. I quickened my pace and ran towards the watering hole. When I reached the lake, all the other animals ran. I ignored everyone and dove straight into the cool water. I swam away from the shore, far enough so that the hyenas would not be able to reach me. The crocodiles were mostly sunbathing while the ones in the water dispersed when I dove into the water. I had killed a crocodile not too long ago and the animals in this world were sentient and smart enough to remember that and not attack me. I stayed in the water and took a moment to cool my body. I panted heavily while wetting my thick mane. I was cooling down at a rapid pace. Not long after, the hyenas reached the watering hole and they stopped to the shore just like I expected. They dared not step into the water. Not only do they hate the water, there were also crocodiles in the lake so they were afraid to come too close. The hyenas reached the lake one by one and before long, all 20 of them were spread across the shore. They were like a herd of animals trying to drink water. They howled and made laughing noises. Some of them tried to push each other into the water, urging themselves to take the first step. They made jerky movements as they took one step into the water before running back. "Oh, what do you think you are doing? Come back here or the crocodiles are going to get you." "Haha, I thought lions are brave but he is running away from us, coward cat." "Will you dive into the lake after him then?" "Hell no. There are crocs there." "Then you can't really call him a coward, can you? I'm literally just a hyena and he is a lion. You can't stay there forever. We will tear you into shreds." They mocked me from the shore but I kept my calm and simply observed them. Since none of them wanted to dive into the lake after me, it gave me time to recover. It seemed they preferred waiting for me to eventually come back to land instead. Some of them started urinating on the water but I still did not react. I calmed myself and my core started cooling. I waited. And waited. And waited some more. Until eventually, I recovered. I counted the hyenas on shore and made sure that the number had not increased yet. Luckily, no reinforcement came to help them. They must be confident that 20 of them could take me down. I contemplated for a few seconds, weighing my chances. Against 100 hyenas, I stood no chance. But against 20 of those nasty beasts? I like my chances. So I took action. Splash! I splashed the water and waved my arms around, as if something had caught me and was drowning me in the water. The hyenas immediately took notice and observed me closely. I continued acting as if a crocodile had finally attacked me. I released a few roars and even fought the invisible enemy. The hyenas laughed and stomped on the water. They unconsciously stepped into the water to take a closer look at my unfortunate fate. I told you the crocs are going to get you. Look at him. Look at him. That's what you get, tailless bastard. And then I plunged down. The laughter of the hyenas sounded muffled underwater, and I slowly made my way towards them. The water was muddy from all their movements, so they never saw me coming. A moment of silence, and when I finally reached the shore, I exploded out from the water. I released a deep roar and swung my paw at the closest hyena. He was laughing a bit too much. His jaw was wide open. When my paw hit him with full force, his lower jaw tore off and flew away in a bloody splash of gore. His body went limp and he fell in the water almost immediately. The rest of the hyenas were stunned, completely caught off guard by my sudden appearance. It never even crossed most animals' minds, acting to deceive the enemy. It was almost too easy to fool and outplay my opponents with a human mind. They scattered like a herd of deer when I launched an ambush. I shook my body to rid the excess water on my fur before I locked in. I embraced my predatory side, and at that moment, hyenas were prey. I unleashed all my remaining rage on them. Against my recovered self, 19 terrified overgrown rats were light work. I tore through them like toys. Third POV. Night fell over the savannah, swallowing the chaos that took place in the land. The battle between Scar and Leo, the war with the hyenas, it all faded into a heavy silence. When morning came again, the Pride went to the watering hole for a drink. But unlike other days, the usual bustle of life around the lake was gone. The air was still and the ground was scarred and stained with blood. Vultures covered the sky in huge numbers, enough to almost cast shadow to the earth below. When the lionesses went closer to the shore of the lake, they saw endless piles of dead bodies, all belonging to the hyenas that had chased after Leo. Their bodies lay torn and broken into shreds. Some pieces were being devoured by crocodiles. Among the Pride members, Sarabi walked around the scene and closely studied the corpses and the blood which stained the earth. But even after a thorough search, she found not a drop of blood that belonged to Leo. In that moment, it was clear, Leo had endured once more. She smiled. How could she not when she was reminded that she gave birth to a monster? The promise stood unshaken. Leo survived, and he will come back. First POV. I have explored the entirety of the Pride lands throughout the years. I knew the geography very well. The climate, the scent, and the scenery, from the smallest bushes to the biggest trees, were all familiar to me. They felt like home. But never have I ever gone past the Pride lands. I've gone to the ends of the kingdom and gazed from the unforgiving cliffs that marked our land to find out how big the kingdom was. But I never went further. I always returned. But today was different. Today, I finally went past that line. I left the place I called home for 2 years and ventured into the outside world, a world that was definitely not covered or explored enough in the Disney movie. The Pride Land was an elevated region, almost like a huge plateau that sustained a whole different ecosystem on top, like a small paradise hidden from the rest of the world. You could not simply leave the kingdom by running in a straight line. It was not as easy as covering plain ground. There were specific routes to follow if you wished to venture into the outside world. I was familiar with such routes from my explorations, so it was not hard to leave the Pride lands. After I was in the outside world, the difference in the landscape was almost immediate. The trees, the hills, and even the earth no longer felt familiar to me. But I pushed on. I was not exactly running or in a hurry since I knew no one would follow me outside the kingdom. I was also exhausted and fatigued, so the initial days of my journey were slow. As much as I would like to pretend otherwise, it was not easy to stand on business against 20 hyenas. Say even if they did not attack, it took great effort to tear apart 20 of them. The journey took me a little over a week to complete. During that time, I covered a massive distance, traveling through different landscapes and challenges that were not nearly life-threatening but annoying nonetheless. One other thing to note was that the place where I was headed was completely different from that of Simba. I knew this because, throughout my journey, I never went past a desert or any dry land. Most of the region I went past could be described as treacherous. There were hills, and the vegetation was sparse. They were often vastly different from each other, but they all shared something in common, and that was that life could not thrive in such places. I caught the scent of animals and saw a few of them myself, which was rare since most animals flee on instinct upon seeing me. But the prey there was not nearly enough to sustain a huge feline like me. So I traveled until I found the perfect region where life could thrive. And I came upon such a region roughly after 1 week of traveling. 1 week later, "This seems familiar," I said to myself while gazing upon the plain that spread before me. The land was flat for the most part, stretching out in every direction with low, dry grass that reached just past my ankles. It was yellow with patches of green where the soil held more moisture. Scattered acacia trees dotted the area, providing just enough shade to cool a body from the heat. I could already see some life in this region. There were ant nests on some branches as well. There was a breeze and I took in the smell of the world. The air was warm and carried dust. The air smelled familiar in a way. I could smell distant dung, prey, and other animals that I was familiar with. I walked through the plains and carefully observed my new surroundings. I followed the tracks on the ground and the trail of scents. They led me to a small cluster of wildebeest grazing on the greener side of the horizon. I continued and came upon a number of zebras and gazelles as well. Indeed, the place was abundant with life, which means more food for me. It would seem the place could sustain a predator like me. It was the perfect place to settle for a while. In fact, the place oddly reminded me of the Pride Lands. The difference was minimal. It was just that this place could not compare in terms of sheer greenery and abundance with my home. The animals looked at me with knowing eyes as I walked under the sunlight. They seemed familiar with lions and knew that if they saw me, it meant I was not trying to hunt. The heat was one of the things I noticed as well. Pride Land was warm but not unbearably hot. You could see heat rising off the ground in faint, visible waves. It made me slow my pace, whether I liked it or not. My first priority was finding the watering hole of this place. There was always life where there was water. Who knows, I might even start hunting there because I was starving. Lions could go several weeks without eating, but that didn't mean we were not starving. The most I did over the week was scavenge some scraps while I traveled, so I needed food, real food. My nose led the way as I followed the scent of water and mud that came frequently with the breeze. I followed the source and knew I would reach there soon. After almost an hour of walking, I could see the watering hole on the horizon. The surroundings were also greener and livelier than any other place. Seeing it made me eager, so I quickened my pace and started slow running towards it. But then, I saw something weird while I was on the way. I saw 4 weird rocks in the distance. The size was large enough to call them boulders, but they were almost triangular. They also seemed to be moving with the wind upon a closer look. What is that? I asked myself and slowed down. I could not even look at the watering hole in the distance anymore. I was completely focused on this new weird thing I saw in the environment. When I got even closer, I finally saw something that completely baffled me. It was a strange, rectangular creature the size of a rhino. It had big black round things for legs. Then it clicked. The memories of my past life that were slowly fading with time came back and hit me like a truck. It was a powerful nostalgia. Those were not rocks, they were tents. And the rectangular creature was none other than a car. Holy shit, I found humans. Holy crap. Humans. For a moment, I froze completely as my brain went haywire, thinking of other things and saving no brain power to control my body. But then I shook my head and shrugged off the useless thoughts that orbit my mind. I started thinking logically instead of just being surprised. Of course, there were humans in this world. The animated movie never extended further than the Pride Lands, but there was a whole other world outside that. There were humans, other animals, other continents, and the whole thing. And it was not surprising to see humans in such a thriving region as this one. From the vehicle and the tent, I guess they were researchers. Humans have endless curiosity that wants to study and learn everything in the world. They were not poachers or hunters, so they wouldn't interfere with anything. They would most likely just observe. Everything was fine, there was no need to panic at all. But even still, it was ironic for me to meet humans like this. I felt equally excited and fearful. I pushed my nose out and took in the scent of the surroundings. I was tracking the smell of water, so I didn't focus on other scents. But now that I've taken in the surrounding air without tracking anything, I could smell the unnatural smell of mosquito repellents and other human smells. There were 5 distinct scents, which means there were likely 5 people inside the tent. Curious, I slowly approached their camp. Are those cameras? I set upon taking a closer look at the car. There was a bunch of equipment on the vehicles, but the thing I recognized was the camera. Perhaps they were not only researchers but photographers as well. A group of wildlife photographers. Oh hell. Something said. Something that was not me. I stopped and stared at the mun that just spawned out of nowhere from the front of the car. The mun was a black and he was sitting in the driver's seat. I could understand him as well. It felt odd, but 2 years was nearly not enough for me to forget English. I huffed out a chuckle seeing the blood drain from his face. He was frozen on the spot and I could almost smell fear on him. We locked eyes. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes while I simply observed him, getting increasingly amused. I moved towards him ever so slowly. Guys. Guys. Gooies. He screamed with a straight face, trying not to rile me up even while he panicked. Someone seemed to hear his call as there was movement inside the closest tent. Another man came out with annoyance clear in his movement. What? He asked, and when he saw me, he froze much like the first man. What is it? Another movement. This time it came from the next tent. A woman walked out wearing sunglasses. She also froze much like the people that did before her. For a long time, we all just stood there. No one made a move. They were too afraid to make any sudden movements while I was too amused to do anything to shift the dynamic. Don't worry, I've tried monkeys and I didn't really like the taste. I'm sure you taste similar, I said and laughed out loud. They did not understand lion language, but they heard my deep huffs which I called a laugh. They seemed even more unnerved by the situation. I told you we should have hired a ranger just in case, the black man on the vehicle said with a frustrated, fearful voice. His tone was hushed like a whisper, but the volume was shouting. Just stay calm, if it wanted us dead we would already be, said the man in front of the tent with a careful, timid posture. I turned my body towards him and I took 3 steps forward. My eyes carefully observed him. It was strange seeing a human from an animal's perspective. They were ugly. Like worms. In nature, strength and survival was beauty. But humans did not have claws, fangs or fur. They looked so vulnerable that it was a little strange. That made the mun appealing. Oh God, please don't eat me, the mun said, or was it a mun? Upon a closer look, I realized that he was very young. Probably a teenager. I'm too young to die, I can't even drink yet, he said with a shaky smile. I ignored him and turned to the final human. It was a woman, but unlike the previous 2, she was looking at me with awe and wonder. I noticed she had taken off her sunglasses. I barely saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Interesting. I walked towards her. The mun flinched and trembled when I walked past him and went closer to the woman. Her breath hitched when I stopped in front of her. I was close enough so that she could feel my massive presence. The fear in her increased, but so did the wonder and amazement. I blinked at that, confused. If it was my past life and I saw myself, I was sure I would be shitting my pants right now. At my current size, I was easily twice her weight. Even when she stood upright, I reached her chest while standing on all 4. Oh wow, look at you, she said and swallowed with a shaky breath. You're unlike anything I've ever seen before, so different in body structure compared to the rest. Does it have something to do with your tail? She asked herself to deal with her nervousness and panic. She slowly moved her hand down to her pocket and took something out. I thought it was going to be a gun or a weapon, but strangely enough, she took out a small note and a pencil and started scribbling on it. Crazy bitch began sketching me on her notebook. I guess she was one of those girls insanely passionate about certain things. I heard movement to my side and we both turned to look at the 3rd tent. I saw a small head peeking out from the tent. It was an aged mun from what I could tell. He looked at us for a few seconds before silently pulling back into the tent and zipping the entrance closed. As if that was going to stop me. I shook my head and turned away from the woman. I looked around the camp one last time before I walked away altogether. Although meeting humans was interesting, it became dull when they were that scared. Besides, they were still part of nature, so nothing too groundbreaking. Instead, I focused back on the watering hole. My priority should be quenching my thirst and catching a meal as soon as possible. I left the humans to their own devices and walked to the watering hole. The place was a little different from the one we had in the Pride Lands. Instead of a lake, the watering hole seemed to be the leftover of a massive river. I'd assume it was a river during the rainy seasons and dried up during the dry seasons. There were some animals on the edge, taking hesitant sips of the muddy water. I did not see any crocodile on shore, but from the behavior of the animals, I assumed there were crocodiles in the water. The prey animals moved away when I came close. I drank the water while keeping a keen eye on the water surface. If I saw the simplest wave or movement in the still water, I would move away. The crocodiles here could be like the ones back home. They could be aggressive to all creatures that came too close for all I knew, an opportunist predator that will eat anything. Therefore, I was cautious. After I was satisfied, I walked around the watering hole. I was on a constant lookout for opportunities. I was not exactly in top condition and I was tired from the travel, so I would prefer if there was a sick, old, or injured prey that I could take down easily. But even better, if I saw another predator eating food, I could steal it from them. Nature said all was fair, and stealing prey from other predators was definitely not beneath me at this point. I laid down under the shade of a tree near the watering hole. I panted to cool my body heat under the searing temperature of the savanna. My eyes were in a constant lookout under the shade. I would hunt after I cooled down and rested. The region was still completely new for me. I did not know where most herds graze, I did not know where the prey sleep, I did not know their routine or their routes. That would make hunting much more difficult and I might need to put even more effort than I usually did. Hello. I heard a voice coming from the top of the tree. I looked up to see a big mean-looking vulture sitting in one of the branches. Hi, I said back, unsure. You new around here? It asked me. Strange, I never really talked to birds before. The only one I could remember talking to was Zazu, but he was eaten not long after Mufasa was killed. He was trying to be sneaky for Sarabi and that did not work well for him. Scar ate him but didn't even swallow. He threw the bird up after chewing a few times. The disgustingly brutal scene was still vivid in my mind. Yes, I said. Oh. He said. I felt like my answer was exactly what he wanted to hear. This is gonna be a good meal, he whispered to himself while looking at my form up and down, just like how I would look at my target prey in a distance when I hunt. Anyway, welcome to Serengeti, new blood, he said with a wide, unsettling smile. Opportunity comes to those who wait. Splash. My ears perked up and my body also postured upright upon hearing the sound. A small smile graced my face as I looked at the scene unfolding in the watering hole. While a herd of zebras were taking turns drinking, the water suddenly came alive and a reptilian jaw clamped down on the front leg of one of the zebras. Chaos ensued as every other animal nearby ran far away from the water. Even the zebras did not try to save their friend, they ran away. Every creature only lives for themselves. The zebra released an agonizing sound. It sounded similar to the neigh of horses, but with more shrillness and pauses. The closest thing I could compare the sound to was a broken engine that wouldn't start properly. The prey struggled fiercely, kicking up dust and splashing water simultaneously. But the crocodile was just as determined to not let go of its hold. The jaws of crocs were designed to hold prey and never let go. I watched with tight and ready muscles as the two animals struggled against each other. It was like watching life and death compete in a tug of war. Nature dictates that for one to live, the other must die. The crocodile just hung on to the zebra, using his body weight to make sure the prey never escaped. Therefore, after 2 minutes of struggling, the zebra got tired. Right then, the crocodile started using its strength and tugged the zebra into the water. It was not a swift pull. The crocodile could not overpower a full-grown zebra that easily. It was more like persistent tugging. Inch by inch, the zebra was getting pulled into the water. And when one of its feet was in the water, the tugging war immediately became favorable for the crocodile. The zebra slipped on the mud and started losing himself. It was going to die. You could see that it was inevitable. It was at this exact moment that I decided to move. I shot out from under the shade and ran towards the crocodile. I released a rugged roar. 2 of my feet went into the water and created splashes upon my wake. When I reached the scene, I slammed my paw at the head of the crocodile. The attack exploded in the water. I felt the tough armor of the prehistoric lizard, but the sheer force behind my attack was enough to send the crocodile reeling. It released the hold it had on the zebra, letting the prey run away. "Thanks for the food," I said, and ran out of the shallow water as well. The zebra ran, but with its exhaustion from the crocodile fight and the injury in its leg, it was even slower than a newborn. I allowed it to run far away from the watering hole. If I had killed it instantly, it would be a hassle to move the dead body. So I drove the injured zebra to the place where I wanted it to be. I moved to the left to make him go to the right, and I ran to his right to drive him to the left. I did this for a few seconds until the zebra was exactly where I wanted it to be. Then I put him out of his misery. It was a swift kill. I swung my arm at its hind legs, making it collapse on the ground, and I lunged at its neck. My canines sank into the neck, anchoring themselves and giving me a firm hold of the prey. The zebra struggled under me for a while. The final life of any animal always leaves with extreme resistance. A dying animal is always the strongest. But I used my paws to press it down. A few seconds later, the zebra went still. I did not even take a moment to rest, as it was such an easy kill. I stood up, the zebra still in my jaw, and I dragged the carcass into the nearby shade. I ate my meal under the tree. It was my first real meal in over a week, so my instinct quickly took over and I started devouring the meat. Nature built me to go without food for even longer periods, but with my lifestyle of abundance back in the Pride Lands, it had been rough for me to go without eating for a week. When I tore into the gut of the zebra, a thick warm aroma hit me. The smell was intense and pungent. A human would vomit upon taking a whiff. But that was the smell of fresh meat for me. "How I missed this," I said, and like a king, I feasted on the organs first. I left the intestines and stomach, but I ate the rest. The liver was the best part. It was juicy and tender like tofu. Next was the heart, which was like a sponge cake with thick cream inside. The lungs, kidneys, and spleen came after that, all offering different textures to the meal. You might think eating meat every time could get boring, but each part of the body offers different types of flavor, like a Thanksgiving meal. "You are a good one, aren't you? I think I might have gotten the wrong impression, seeing that you have a unique back," the vulture said while flapping its long wings. But while it was flapping its wings, it was running towards me like a chicken. It did not come too close nor did it stay too far, close enough to observe, far enough to run away when attacked. That behavior said a lot without saying a word. Animals may be able to speak with each other, but a huge part of communication was based on body language. In fact, lions were quite the exception. We were social creatures, and among the pride, there was a lot of talking. But you wouldn't see that much in other animals, even those living in a herd. So you should be able to understand my feelings when the damn vulture kept talking to me. It was quite talkative. "What do you want?" I asked while lapping up the blood inside of the zebra. The blood was thick, and it was so red it almost looked black. This kind of blood was also one of my favorites. It was also Zuri's favorite, because she would lick the red mess on my face after feeding. It was one of her favorite things about feeding. "Nothing much. It's just that seeing you are alone and it's a full-grown adult zebra that you are eating there, I was thinking that there would certainly be leftovers for me," the vulture said with an expectant tone. The zebra I was eating was full-grown. It could weigh roughly around 300 kilograms. That was enough to feed a whole pride, much less one lion. It was too much even for me. "I don't feed those that do not belong to me," I said. "I'd rather let it rot away than give it to you." "That is unfortunate. But still, rotting food will do for me," it said, awfully optimistic. "I will throw the remains into the water for the crocodile," I said, and that finally left him speechless. Crocodiles were known to eat everything, even bones. It was said that their stomach acid could even dissolve iron nails. But the vulture did not move away from his place. It simply stayed there, watching me feast on the prime meat. The silence went on for a long time until I decided to speak again and finally throw the proposal I'd had in my mind all along. "Tell you what, I will let you eat as much as you want. Not only that, I will let you have all the remains of my kills going forward. You will never be hungry again, I said and paused a little. But only if you become my subject, I said. The vulture blinked, clearly interested. What do you mean become your subject? It just means that you will be a part of my pride, so you will do as I ask and serve me, I said, and that seemed to surprise it for some reason. And what is it that you will make me do? It asked with an incredulous tone. Well, I will ask you to scout for me. I am unfamiliar with this region and its terrain, so you will report to me where prey animals are so that I can go and hunt them. Or in other cases, you will report to me if you notice a weak or injured animal so that I can hunt them. And when I bring them down, I will give you a portion, I said. The vulture looked at me with wide eyes for a while before it screamed. I'm in. I'm so in. I am 100,000 million% in, the vulture said and started jumping in its place. I smiled at his giddy excitement. It was easier to bring him under me than I ever expected. I bit off a huge chunk of meat and spit it out. The meat fell in front of him and he immediately came forward and devoured the meat with its sharp beak. After it was done, it released a content croak and spread its wings. Perhaps it was the first fresh meat that he ever had. Vultures were only scavengers after all. My main problem with the new region was my lack of knowledge. I did not know where the prey animals would be, and I was ignorant of their routes. I was unfamiliar with the region as well, so having a bird in the sky to help me could be a huge help and a solution to my problem. How did you come up with such an amazing idea? It asked while wiping its beak with its wings. I paused for a second before I answered. My father, the King Mufasa, used to have a bird subject as well. We called him Zazu and he worked and thrived under my father. Speaking of which, what is your name? I asked. The name is Grim, he answered, Grim the Scavenger. I hummed in acknowledgement. I swallowed a chunk of meat and introduced myself as well. And I am Leo. After that, I enjoyed my meal in silence. Grim became comfortable quickly around me, seeing that I wouldn't harm him. At one point he came beside me and ate the back of the zebra along with me. His sharp beak stabbed and tore off pieces of meat. The sun was beginning to make its descent in the sky. The color of the world shifted from bright to dull orange. I'd already had my fill at that point and I was laying with the carcass. My eyes were closed but my ears were twitching, seemingly having a consciousness of their own. They were listening for any threats while I fell into a shallow sleep. And that was when it happened. A thunderous roar tore through the sky. My eyes snapped open almost immediately and I sat upright. Roar. I waited and listened to the world carefully and it came again. Roar. And again. Roar. I could almost see the lion that produced such a roar. The things I could deduce from the sound alone might stump others. I could tell the general size of the lion, the state of his health, the pride he had cultivated, his age, and even his mood. Each roar of a lion was distinct. I smiled. I was hoping that there would be a lion pride in the Serengeti. I needed to raise an army to fight Scar and his hyenas. That meant I had to conquer another pride first before I could even hope to return. The roar continued. It was the sound of warning and a declaration of authority. But to my ears, it was a begging sound. The lion was literally begging to be defeated and his pride conquered. But that was when my smile turned upside down. Roar. Another roar split the air. But this time it was different. I've said it before, each lion had a distinct roar, so I could tell immediately that this roar came from another lion. A different one. But that was not even the worst of it. Roar. Another roar came. This time it was yet again from a different lion. At that point I was frowning and concern started emerging in my heart. Suddenly I was not at peace anymore. 3 different lions, 3 different roars, thundered from the distance. They were different, yet they rang in sync, as if they were instruments playing the same song. Of course. Things were never that easy. The pride I was planning to conquer was not ruled by one king. Instead, it was ruled by a coalition of 3 lions or more. I think I might have a headache, I said with a rumbling growl after the roaring show was over. The Lion Kings patrolled their territory and sent warnings with their roars. This went on for quite a bit before it was over. Luckily, they had not come towards me. If they did, I was kind of screwed. I had gained much confidence after beating Scar in a one-on-one fight. I was sure that I could fight on par with or surpass other male lions. But against 3? That was still beyond me. Winning that fight would be the same as gaining the ability to fly right now. I stood no chance. I was meat in an open pot. Grim, do you have any knowledge of the lion pride that lives in this region? I asked the vulture sitting contentedly beside me with a belly full of food. You mean the Siranjet pride? I nodded. Is that what they are called? How many members are there? Well, they are famous around here. Every animal knows the Siranjet pride as the rulers of the region. I would say they are about 30 in total. There are 3 kings, obviously, 15 or so female adults, and the rest are cubs and subadults, Grim said. And what a number that was. The so-called Siranjet pride were more than our pride back home, even though we were thriving in the land. But I guess I should expect that a pride led by 3 males was bound to be larger and more dominant. The situation was both good and bad for me. My aim as a solitary lion was obviously to defeat the kings and take over the pride. But that would be almost impossible with 3 kings. At the same time, precisely because the pride was ruled by 3 males, they were large. Which was good for my aim of raising an army. Defeating 3 lions alone seemed like an impossible task, but I was confident of achieving this feat in the future. If it really came down to it, I could even form a coalition of my own to take down the current kings. And after that, I would fight again with my allies to become the sole ruler of the pride. It was a difficult task, but not an impossible one, especially for someone like me. While I was thinking all of this, the sun was beginning to set on the horizon. The sky was painted an eerie orange, and in the looming darkness, creatures came for me. My ears perked up on instinct after hearing the sound of multiple predators approaching me. I growled when I heard the familiar sound they made. The closest thing I could compare the sound to was a howl mixed with creepy laughter. The sound was not mighty or threatening like a lion's, but that was not their aim. The sound they made echoed through the plain, making them feel like they were everywhere and more in number than they actually are. It was an intimidating way to announce their presence. Most animals would shit themselves upon hearing that. But me personally, I was having none of that. Damn hyenas, of course they are here too, I said and sat properly. I was ready to explode at any given moment. I could guess why they were coming after me. It was probably because of the half-eaten zebra that I had with me. Hyenas often scavenge for food, so it was no wonder that they came for me. When they finally came into view, I locked my eyes on them. They were smaller and skinnier than I expected. I had gotten used to the well-fed hyenas back in the Pride Lands, so I was unsure if they were adults at first. I counted 16 or 17 of them. They did not charge at me even though they clearly wanted the food. They opted for circling around me instead. They continued making their god-awful sound while running circles around me. Their small tails stood upright, and they opened their jaws to display their sharp canines. Slimy saliva dropped on the ground as they acted like rabid beasts. Are they seriously trying to intimidate me? I thought to myself while watching them. It would seem they wanted me to run without a fight so that they could get the food with no injuries. Most predators would run at that moment. I already had my fill, and the excess was not worth fighting for. Heck, other lions might run away as well. Not me though. I had serious beef with their kind. And they posed no threat to me. I had torn through bigger hyenas and fought a larger number while I was injured and fatigued. What were 16 of them going to do now? Eventually, they realized that I had no intention of leaving, so they moved to attack me. One hyena in particular thought it would be wise to bite at the carcass and try to steal it from me. So I slapped the shit out of him. The moment he stepped into my range, I swung my arms at him. I was not even trying to claw at him or catch him. I threw my paw more similar to throwing a slap. I did not even release my claws. When my paw hit him, it released a muffled explosion, like a boxing glove hitting a punching bag. The hyena froze, as his brain was rattled. His muscles tensed, causing him to shit himself and pee in the process before he fell on the ground, unconscious. Like I said, I slapped the shit out of him. There was silence. A long silence that stretched for a really long time. The unconscious hyena eventually woke up and he ran away immediately, but not before slipping once or twice due to the dizziness. After that, none of the hyenas approached or came close to me. They knew I could not finish the whole zebra, so they lingered still. If you saw someone knock out one of your friends with one swing, it would really work to demotivate any conflict. I was still too full to move around, so I did not chase them away. Instead, I relaxed under the tree and rested for the night. "Grim, do tell me if they try anything fishy," I said. I was still unfamiliar with the region, and none of the animals knew who I was. But tomorrow would mark the beginning of my life here in the Serengeti. The plan was simple. Thrive, conquer the foreign pride, and go back to the Pride Lands to kill Scar with my pride. For now, I rest. There was strength in numbers. A group will thrive when individuals fail. This was a known fact even among the dumbest animal in the savannah. I had almost never struggled with other animals of a different species in my life. A lion was feared and respected. Not just that, a lion almost always belonged to a bigger pride. But when the safety of the pride was gone and other predators knew that I was alone, they were more daring than I could ever believe. Even if I were an apex predator, the fact that I was alone seemed like a glaring weakness. So around midnight, the hyenas began making their move again. The sound of their creepy laughter and broken howls made it impossible to sleep through. I opened my eyes in the dark. Lions had incredible night vision, so I was able to see almost as clear as day. The 6 or 7 hyenas that lingered around me had multiplied many times over. I did not know exactly how many they were since some were behind me, but I would assume they reached 30 in total. I slowly rose from my sleep and released a low, rumbling growl to show that I was alert and ready. The sound of my growl was easily below the edge of human hearing, meaning they wouldn't even hear the sound. Low vibrations travel for longer distances, so my boiling growl, which seemed insignificant compared to a full roar, could still reach up to a mile. It was a vibration that sent a message through the literal bones of the hyenas. The last warning before I lose patience. The hyenas were scared, and some trembled. But when they looked at the numerical advantage they had, they wanted to try their luck still. It seemed I had not only underestimated the animals of the outside world, but I also underestimated how hard life was outside the Pride Lands. Serengeti and the Pride Lands were almost identical, but due to many other factors, life and prey were vastly more abundant back home. Surviving was not easy here in this region, and a half-eaten zebra was more than worth risking their lives for. A fight broke out in the middle of the night, and I welcomed it with open jaws and bared teeth. I believe it was my first fight over a carcass. I would learn later on that a predator of one species stealing the kills of another was all too common in this land, so it was no surprise I was attacked. They surged forward in waves, looking like demons that broke through the night. But the situation was all too familiar to me. I was in an almost similar situation, but worse, just the week prior. And since then, I have been thinking about ways I could have fought better. Kinda like how you came up with better replies during a shower when the argument was already over. Only this time, these new hyenas were giving me the golden opportunity to test my replies. The sounds we made were nature at its most violent. The silence of the night seemed to amplify the sound of the battle. The whole fight did not last long, not even half an hour. I did not suffer any injury as well. I was designed to bear the bite of bigger teeth and win against stronger foes. A stronger bite force was useless when they did not have the power to bite and pull with raw violence like lions do. A jaw that could snap bones was nothing when they could never land a clean bite. In the end, the even small advantage they had was for chewing the leftover bones on my rotting waist. A few hyenas went to sleep that night, only to never wake up again. The next morning, I released a big yawn under the warm light of the rising sun. Although there was a small scuffle with the hyenas last night, I would say I had a proper rest. I looked around at the similar yet unfamiliar environment I found myself in. The vulture was nowhere to be found, so I was alone. The zebra carcass was still in front of me, but the meat was no longer fresh. There were hundreds of flies buzzing around the carcass, and I could see some insects like a colony of ants trying to scavenge on my food. I looked further and saw 3 dead hyenas at a distance. They were nearly dead when I left them, but it seemed they had crawled even further away from me with their dying breath. The battle was not grave, and I suffered almost no consequences, but it made me learn a few things about Serengeti. The predators here were more aggressive and desperate than one would expect, which hints at prey being more scarce or at least harder to hunt. I would confirm the latter when I go out to hunt myself. At the same time, I wonder if such fights could be beneficial for me in the future. I had been training myself most of my life, but the number of times I've been in battle could be counted with one hand. So perhaps this kind of conflict could be good to gather battle experience. There was no risk of death, but much to learn. I said there was risk because the hyenas never tried to kill me last night. Although they attacked, their aim was to steal my food. If I had lost the fight, I could run away, and they would be content with their success of driving me away from my food. They wouldn't come after me like Scar's lion did because there was no command or personal issues. It was just survival. Maybe I could seek such conflict as a part of my training. I spent the morning having such thoughts and eating the zebra again. I ate as much as I could and left the rest for the savannah. The zebra was around 300 kilograms, but that was accounting for their bones, guts, skin, and every other part that was not meat. I ate most of the good chunk of meat and organs and abandoned the rest to the savannah. The food in my belly should last me a few days. So in the meantime, I was going to explore the Serengeti landscape and get myself familiar with my new home. The sun was slowly climbing in the sky as I roamed. 2 years and 1 month old. It's been 5 days since I came to the Serengeti, my new home. And from the explorations I've done during the past few days, I could say that the Serengeti was infinitely bigger than the Pride Lands. Like seriously, it's baffling how big this place is. There was virtually no end. It was unlike the Pride Lands, where you would eventually stumble upon the unforgiving cliffs no matter which direction you went. It was like solid ocean in its endlessness. But perhaps it was the Pride Lands that were weird and not the other way around. The vastness of the land posed some expected troubles for a predator like me. For example, tracking prey was much more important when hunting. The wide area also means that preys were spread around, so opportunities were limited and scarce. I was starting to understand why those hyenas were so persistent in stealing my food. Prey doesn't come by so easily, so food was precious. It was a seemingly easy concept to grasp, but as a cub that grew up under Mufasa and Scar's reign, I was a little slow in this regard. I fought for food, sure, but I fought for excess food for my growth. The other animals here fought for food barely enough for survival. There was no excess. I was starting to realize how spoiled I was. It was funny, but not in a way that made me want to laugh. After 4 days of not eating anything, my stomach was starting to demand food once more. Hunger grew at the pit of my stomach like a bottomless abyss. Any other lion could go a week with the amount of food I ate, but I was growing and needed more food than the rest. The injuries I sustained from all the conflicts that happened recently were now healed. I was hungry and my body was in its prime state to hunt. So I jog across the plains with my ears and nose tracking prey. But more than that, I was relying on Grim to lead me towards the prey. How far? I asked the vulture flying overhead. You're almost there. They should come into view pretty soon, Grim replied and flapped his wings to fly even higher in the sky. Having a bird as your scout was an absolute cheat code. I could understand why Mufasa kept Zazu alive all those years and made him the advisor. Without the help of Grim, it would surely take me more time and effort to track down the herd. This world was not Disney, but it was not exactly like my past life either. There was a middle ground where the supernatural settled in reality. There was enough room for me to take advantage if I lived smart. Just the fact that all animals share a common language and can communicate brought a whole new realm of possibility to explore. Scar allied with hyenas, Mufasa did with a monkey and a bird. Perhaps I could go even further than that. I wonder what would it take to ally with an elephant. Maybe I could threaten to kill their baby if they don't listen to me. Better yet, what if I kill the baby and make them hate lions in general so that they would attack the Serengeti pride? While endless thoughts, some stupid and some revolutionary, orbit my mind, I finally reached the herd of prey. I could see them grazing on the green plain from a distance. Look at them, food with legs, I commented while licking my lips. But upon closer inspection, I realized what type of animal the herd was, and my good mood plummeted instantly. A herd of impala, seriously? I said with a sigh. There was nothing wrong with having an impala for dinner, but there was something peculiar about them. And that was, they were one of the most difficult prey to catch. Impala were extremely agile, and they had this way of running in a zigzag instead of a straight line. One could say that they were mixing leaps with running to change direction during a sprint. Even cheetahs struggled to catch them. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how cowardly they were. Impala were known to be quick to flee. They move in close-packed herds, and if one among hundreds of eyes saw you, it was over. Well, I was always known to be a great stalker. I thought to myself and headed down towards the herd. I kept low to the ground, my wide shoulders spread and allowed a low center of gravity. My giant paws spread my weight on the earth so that I move without a single sound. I was low enough that my belly brushed against the cool blades of the tall grass. Every step was a whisper, every breath a measured ghost. I was the very definition of stealth, with a kind of movement I've earned by practicing 1,000,000 times. If anyone had watched me, they would have thought I was born for this. Which was not far off. I forged myself into this. But even with all that, it wasn't easy. This wasn't the Pride Lands. The Serengeti had a different rhythm and a different flavor in the air. The ground was rougher, more uneven. The breeze wasn't a consistent companion, it was more like a sly trickster that changed direction randomly. I couldn't predict it. I didn't trust it. It felt like the land itself was against me. Still, I inched forward with my eyes fixed on the herd of impalas grazing near the richer grass. They stood in a cluster, so it was hard to pick one target. Therefore, I approached them as a whole. My ears rotated and filtered the sounds. Birds, insects, the gentle murmur of hooves shifting on earth. No alarm yet. Good. I checked the wind with a flick of my tongue. Still blowing across my left shoulder. Not ideal, but I could work with that. I moved even closer, with my back paws falling in the same spots as my front. Those places were without a twig or dry leaf, so they don't make a sound. I was so silent I could hear my own heartbeat. And then an ear twitched. A head rose. Another followed. Then a third. I stopped moving and lay down on the ground. I did not know where I went wrong, but somehow some of the impala noticed my presence. They moved their head with jerking motions. They looked everywhere, which told me that they didn't know where I was. But then one of them released a snort and they all flinched. They did not run, but they quickly moved away from their position. I could read their body language, so I knew they were even more guarded and alert. I watched them move away from the spot and choose a further place with barely any grass or bushes which I could use to sneak up to them. At that point, it was no use hiding, so I sat upright. My face was twitching and I was totally speechless. Because I realized they never sensed me like at all. It was akin to one of the impala saying he had a gut feeling, and they all heeded his words and moved away. What the actual hell kind of instinct was that. They took being cautious to the next level. Who do they think they are, Batman? Unbelievable, I whispered to myself. Perhaps it was because they had many predators, unlike back home. There were lion pride numbering 30 members. I've also noticed an abundance of predators like wild dogs, cheetahs, leopards, hyenas, etc. in this land. Perhaps because of them, the prey was more cautious. I could not stress enough how the Pride Land was heaven compared to the outside world. I walked away from the place while observing the herd. I was going to circle around them and stalk them again from another direction. I remembered the first impala who felt my presence, and I was going to attack from the opposite of where he was. So I stalked the herd for a second time. I was even more careful with my second approach. I stalked them with the patience of a mother on her child. I did not rush, I did not force anything. I spent almost an hour just flanking them. And when I saw that many were busy grazing, only then did I even take steps towards them. But in the end, my second attempt also failed. This time it was due to a factor that was out of my control. Damn it. I said, and sat upright when I felt the wind blowing my scent towards them. The breeze ruffled my fur and gently whispered to me that it screwed me over. The impala caught my scent and they ran with grunts. I did not chase them, so they did not run far. But still, they were in a new area, which meant that I would have to start over again. No luck, huh? Grim asked while landing beside me. What do you think? I asked back in a foul mood. I should not expect my first 2 tries to succeed, but it still pissed me off. Should I scout for another herd? Grim asked, but I shook my head without giving it a thought. No need, just give me some time, I said, and moved away from the grassland. If one thing didn't work, I shall find a way that does. I was not some dumb creature that stuck to one thing and died if that didn't work. I was a fan of Bear Grylls. What was it that he said? Improvise. Adapt. Overcome. I will have an impala for dinner. I ran up to the higher ground a little further away from where the herds were grazing. It was far enough that I could see the entire horizon along with the herd. It provided a great view for planning and contemplation. After I reached the place, I sat there and simply observed for a while. The herd of impala became a puzzle that needed solving, and I was brainstorming how to do just that. If the traditional way of stalking and hunting did not work, I just had to find other ways. It was better than spamming one plan again and again and hoping for luck. I spent more time sitting there and thinking than I did stalking them. An hour had passed, and the sun was starting to reach its highest point in the sky. By that point, I finally came up with a plan to solve my problem. In the beginning, I was thinking of plans that were too complex and complicated. But the answer was staring at me all this time. I did not need to constantly invent things or come up with new stuff. Sometimes, reflecting on my experience worked just as well as coming up with a new plan. I've hunted an animal that was just as cautious, if not more, in the past. The rabbits of the Pride Lands. The same technique that I used to catch the rabbits as a cub, in theory, should work on the impala as well. But to do that, I needed some preparation, so I spent the next hour studying them once more. In total, I spent 2 hours overlooking the plains. After I was done, I moved down again towards the herd with greater confidence in my new strategy. I've also learned what I needed, now it was just a matter of putting that into action. The impala were grazing, and while doing so, they were going from place to place in a recognizable pattern. It was their instinct to shift from patch to patch in search of fresher growth and fuller vegetation. So, taking into account the land and the greenery I saw from a distance, it was not hard to predict where the herd would move next. So instead of stalking the herd, I moved towards the land I predicted they would graze on next. I then decided on a proper hiding spot that was surrounded by bushes. I had enough time on my hands to make more preparations, so I took some broken twigs and dried shrubs to make the place an even better hiding spot. After I was done, I used my paws to dig the spot. I did not dig too deep, just enough to plow the land and create sand. Then I rolled on the ground, masking my body oil and scent with the dirt. I could never hide my scent completely, but this should help. With the unpredictability of the wind in Serengeti, the small cover could decide success from failure. I was taking all the advantage I could get. After the preparations were done, I lay down on the perfectly hidden spot. The bushes and the shrubs I collected hid me completely. Not just that, I was surrounded by green grass and healthy vegetation, some of which I noticed the impala favoring more than the rest. I did not choose the spot solely because it offered a good hiding spot. I also chose it because it was filled with their favorite grass and vegetation, which they liked to eat. And so I waited. And waited. And waited. And waited a bit more. It was not as long as the time I spent cooking up the plan, but since I had nothing to think about, the time seemed longer. Eventually, the herd wandered into the area just like I predicted. I did not move a single muscle. I waited patiently until some of them wandered close enough to my hiding spot. They were already in my range and I could attack at any time, but I still held back. It was only when one particular impala with distinctive curved horns came close to me that my body tensed. It was the same motherfucker who had the gut feeling and told the others to move during my first attempt. My muscles coiled, my paws spread, and my claws came out to better grip the earth. I waited for the right moment, and when the impala moved down his head to graze, I exploded out without missing a beat. I grabbed the earth and pulled myself forward. I was a rocket of flesh and bones, not particularly fast in the long shot but unbeatable in short bursts. I was simply a living weapon in motion. My target did not run immediately. He was so spooked by my sudden appearance that he slipped and fell. It was hilarious to watch. I released an excited roar that had a hint of hunger. The prey tried to run, but before he could ever reach his full speed, I was already behind him. The impala leapt high, moving in a zigzag to throw off predators. It was a defensive technique of running that worked well for him so far, considering he was still alive. But I was having none of that. Before his hooves could touch the ground and change direction like a slimy prey, I lunged at him. My body slammed against him while he was midair, and my jaw found the back of his neck as if guided. We fell, and I crushed him under my weight. He kicked up a cloud of dust using the last bit of his dying strength, but it was no use as he was under me. I was an immovable mountain that he wouldn't escape even if his limbs doubled in number. I seemed to have crushed his ribcage and destroyed some organs when I landed on top of him. So the bite of the neck was just a final blow. The impala trembled, and I could feel his life leaving his body. After it was over, the soul left a carcass for me to enjoy. I basked in my success. I will not simply survive in this land, I shall thrive. The rest of the herd ran away and disappeared far from where the eye could see. I spent the next few minutes biting down on the impala before I stood up and carried it towards a better place. I was not going to eat my meal under the sun and in an open plain. That would be equally uncomfortable and dangerous, as I had come to learn. The impala was not big, probably around 70 kilograms. When leaving the bones, skin and dirty intestines, it should be enough to completely fill my belly. I carried my meal through the savannah. I was searching for a shade, but the area I was in was mostly open plan with grass and bushes, so trees were a rare sight. But eventually, I saw a tree in the distance. I was about to head towards the shade, but the human vehicle parked not far away gave me second thoughts. I had not seen them again ever since I first saw them, so it was kind of surprising that I stumbled upon them again. In the end, though, I decided to go under the shade anyway. I brought my prey under the shade, and after cooling down for a moment, I began eating my hard-earned meal. I kept an eye on the vehicle while eating. It was about 40 meters away from me, but I could still spot the humans inside the vehicle. For some reason, they were taking a picture of me? Or was it a video? I was not sure. The only thing I knew was that they were pointing their camera at me. In the end, it doesn't really matter to me, so I ignored them. I rarely went 4 days without eating back home, so upon finally getting my paws on some meat, I literally inhaled most of it. An impala was not big prey. It had more or less 30 kilograms of pure meat if we exclude the hide and bones. But it was more than enough for one growing lion. The food filled my belly to the brim. I spent the first hour constantly eating and chewing. After that, I slowed down my pace and cleaned my bloody face and paws. I would nibble on my meat from time to fill myself even more. At that point, I allowed Grim to feed on the meal as well. He perched on top of the impala and began digging into the meat as well. I watched him with wonder. Having a beak must suck because he was eating so slowly. I could never. I shifted my eyes from Grim and looked to the humans who did not leave even after an hour had passed. Instead, they seemed to have moved even closer while I was feeding. One of them was clearly pointing his camera at me from the back of the vehicle. I propped myself up and took in the smell that came from the vehicle. The smell of the humans was distinctive. They were the same as the ones I encountered last time. There were 4 of them in the vehicle. I was definitely curious about it, but also wary. I am no longer a human, but a lion living in the savannah. Both shared the same planet but lived in completely different worlds. It definitely put some thoughts in my mind, like whether I was in the same world or a different one completely. I heard that religions like Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism believe in reincarnation after death. Specifically, humans were reborn into animals according to their karma. Which is why most of these religions did not allow the killing of animals and were vegetarians. Perhaps that was the case for me. Or maybe not, since the story of Simba was fictional in my past life. I spent the next few hours finishing my food with Grim before I stood up and decided to leave. The impala was now only skin and hide, mostly, and I left it for the scavengers to finish everything else. Grim was too full that he was not able to fly. Watching him try and fall multiple times was amusing to say the least. I walked away from the shade of the tree to head towards my home. During the past few days, I have found a good place to sleep and rest. I was not foolish enough to sleep on the open ground every day just yet. There were unfamiliar dangers roaming around. I head towards the direction of the vehicle while walking away. When I reached there, I could see the humans once more. They were frozen in place, eyes locking on me as if I were both the most magnificent and dangerous creature they had ever laid their eyes on. I observed their exact position and noticed that it provided a great view. I wonder if they saw me hunting, or better yet, if they captured me hunting. Perhaps they were taking a video of me for research. I could understand why I would be an interesting specimen, considering my unnatural build. I huffed and left the vehicle to head someplace else. Third POV. The scene opened up with 3 unique individuals sitting in front of the camera. All of them seemed to be preoccupied with themselves. They were checking their posture, fixing their clothes and hair to look good in front of the camera. "Oh, is it already starting?" the only woman among them said, and when she got the green light from the crew, she slapped the leg of her 2 colleagues. "Okay, where should we begin?" the woman, who looked Asian, said while rubbing her hands to cool off her nerves. "Introduction. Let's start with the introduction," the black man on her right suggested. "Yes, right. Introductions," she said and shifted upright. "Okay, my name is Hannah Park, and I am a zoologist with a specialty in big cats." And I am Kyle Ramirez, drone operator and tech specialist, the man sitting on her left said in a slight Mexican accent. Malik Adeyemi. I was the assistant cameraman and the driver for the project, the man on the right said. He too had a slight African accent. The three of us serve as the project leads responsible for the documentary that you are watching today, Hannah said, taking the initiative among the three as she was more experienced in front of the camera. The success of this project was made possible by the unwavering dedication of countless remarkable individuals ranging from scientists and doctors to filmmakers and rangers, all of whom poured over a decade worth of effort, passion, and expertise into bringing this vision to life, she said and then took a brief pause. But all of it was more than worth it. What you are about to witness was not only made for the sake of entertainment. The story you are about to witness is a great turning point for animal science as a whole. It changed everything we know about the consciousness, emotions, and individuality of wild animals. Especially when it came to big cats like lions, it broke myths and pushed new discoveries, Hannah said. This documentary contains real footage, nothing has been dramatized or faked. And with that said, we need to offer a disclaimer. Some of the scenes you'll see are violent. Nature isn't always beautiful in a way that's easy to watch. There's blood, conflict, and death, which we chose not to censor because that would be the same as omitting certain truths. Hannah said, and the scene panned out from her face to show her two colleagues. Again, we cannot stress this enough. Do not watch this documentary if you are under 16 or sensitive to violence and gore. Suppose you are a lion lover expecting to watch a fun documentary about them. Please do not watch this. Believe me, a lot of them die, especially the male lions, Ramirez said in all seriousness before a hand covered his mouth. Okay, let's stop this before someone spoils the whole thing, Malik said with a wry smile on his face. We poured our hearts into this project, not just as scientists and filmmakers, but as people who were changed by what we saw. So watch with an open mind, and more importantly, an open heart. Hannah finished. Thank you. First POV. Oh God, I'm so full. Normally, my diet was normal and consistent, but now it was scarce and heavy. I had to adjust my way of eating one meal if I wanted to consume the same amount of food as I did before. I felt like an absolute pig while I dragged myself towards my home. Home. If you really thought about it, the word wasn't big enough for what this place was. I looked upon the great place I found for myself a few days ago. The copy rose like a sleeping beast in the tall green sea. If you didn't know already, a copy was a small hill in a flat area. Normally, you would never expect such a hill to exist in an otherwise plain area, which made my home stand out. The whole place was like a small island in a sea of grass. Boulders were stacked, some sat low, while some were half swallowed by the earth. Trees huddled between the crevices, their roots appeared on the surface of the stones. It was like looking at a small, unique living ecosystem in the wild. It looked like a castle if I was being honest. A natural castle that was completely mine. I walked up the rocky hill and headed towards the northern boulder where a small pool hides behind the vegetation. I drank a hefty amount to quench my thirst and wash the dried blood off my mouth and mane. After that, I climbed a little higher on the hill and stopped at a small cave that overlooked the landscape. I lay down there, my muscles relaxed as I took in the familiar smell of stone and greens. The place greatly reminded me of the Pride Rocks, which was a bigger copy than this one. I felt right at home in here. I took a nap after that. The sun was beginning to set, and the cool breeze of the afternoon made for perfect weather. It was a bit too cold at night and too hot in the morning here, so the late afternoon was where the power nap was at. I must have slept for a few hours. But when the sun was half swallowed by the horizon and the world was dyed in a deep orange hue, something woke me up. I was not jolted away, nor was I surprised. It was routine at this point. Roar. 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 3 distinct roars filled the open air of the Serengeti. They thundered across the mountains in strange harmony and claimed ownership of everything under the sky. I was already getting familiar with the 3 Lion Kings, even though I'd never met them. Their roars were arrogant and prideful, like they were not afraid of anything in the world. I guess being in a coalition made lions even more egotistical than they already were. I listened to the roars carefully, determining how far they were and how healthy and big the lions were. A lion's roar could reach 8 kilometers. With the correct wind, even further. So, although I could hear them roar, I was in no real danger. I resisted the urge to roar back at them and let the trio declare their authority. They went quiet after a few minutes. They were clearly accustomed to having no rival or anyone to challenge them. Again, I mean, who would challenge 3 Lion Kings? That was potentially worse than 100 hyenas, in my opinion. Hyenas were weak individually. You pick them off and eventually defeat them if you play smart. It was hard to do the same to lions. I went back to sleep after the show was over. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was gravely mistaken. The day turned out to be quite eventful. My eyes snapped open in the dark. At that point, the sun had long since sunk into the horizon, and it was early in the night. I propped myself up from lying down, and my ears stood up. My nose twitched as I searched for a scent in the air. Roar. It was a roar, one single roar that had no other sound to mingle with. But the roar was extremely loud, and it was not only because of the silence of the night. The roar was loud because it was close. I was immediately alerted and stayed there, unmoving but waiting. A long stretch of silence followed, and then I heard the same roar once more. And then silence. And then another roar. And silence. And again, a roar. But the thing was, every time the roar came, it was closer and closer. It was louder and louder. And soon enough, I could smell the beast that was closing in on me. The odor was heavy, like wet for left too long in the sun. It was mixed with the iron bite of dried blood, sweat, and the acrid stink of urine. It was overall a thick and musky scent that was impossible to mistake. The lion no longer made a sound after I smelled him. Because if I could smell him, it meant he could smell me too. I stood up and jumped down from the cave and swiftly climbed down the hill. I stood my ground on the open plain, eyes locked into the darkness where the scent was coming from. I stood there, waiting. And then 2 piercing eyes locked on me. They were the color of boiling gold, and they penetrated the darkness with an eerie glow. You could literally feel the gaze, like an invisible hand had gripped your body. He came as swiftly as the breeze, like he was hunting me. My paws set themselves firmly on the ground. I did nothing, and that meant I was not showing any aggression, but also meant I showed no fear. I had been careful so far. I went as far as only doing my business in my home so that no lions could know that I was here. But I guess he found me in other ways. If I had to guess, it was because of the remaining impala that I left behind. It probably caught the attention of one of the lions, and then he decided to track the predator that ate the impala and left its remains. Which led him to me. There was no other explanation that came to mind. What do we have here? The lion walked towards me with confidence oozing from his gait. It was hard to make a distinction in the dark. The moon was only a curve on this particular night. I could not get a close look at my enemy, but I saw his general size and structure. He was a fully grown male lion with a thick golden mane that had dark ends. His body was slightly longer than mine, but at the same time, he was thinner than me. I was the heavier one between us, and that was a good thing. The lion was nowhere near as big as Scar was, but he also looked way fitter if that made sense. I could almost feel his desire to start a fight by attacking me. A young male who is living in my territory and killing my prey. A thief, basically, he said and then stopped approaching me. Instead of coming too close, he started walking in half circles around me. He was checking me out very carefully. My size intimidated him, I could tell, but my build truly perplexed him upon closer inspection. He was itching for a fight, but he was not reckless enough to start a fight he couldn't easily win. What kind of abomination has stumbled upon my kingdom? It's impossible to tell how old you are. Your size says full-grown, your mane says teenager, and your scent speaks juvenile, he asked. I did not answer him, so he asked again with a louder voice and harsher tone, "Can you speak?" "There is nothing to talk about." "Leave, I've made this place my home," I said with a measured tone. He laughed, like really laughed. No comedian could have made him laugh harder than I just did. "Ha ha ha ha, my home? Did you really just say that? With whose permission is that your home?" he asked with humor in his voice, and then in the next second, his voice was cold. "Everything in the Serengeti belongs to me and my brother. You are a trespasser, and you asked me to leave? Perhaps your mother didn't teach you manners." "I thought you'd say that. If you believe your words, then I'm standing right here," I said. And then he paused. My words seemed to make him realize that I was not some young trespasser who was cowering in his boots and ready to run. I was standing on what he considered to be his land and claimed it as my own. Not just that, I was waiting for him to do something. His eyes flickered and then narrowed as he realized one other thing. While he was circling around me, I made no movement and simply faced forward. When he was at my side, I did not turn to meet him head-on. I did not keep track of his jaw or his claws. As if to say he was not a threat to me. It was disrespect in the language of the body. Whether he attacked from the left, right, or from behind me, it wouldn't matter. He growled, showing me the animalistic nature that hides behind a mask of intelligence. The ground vibrated with something raw and primal. It was the final warning from a king. I won't ask you to leave. I'll kill you where you stand, he said his final piece, and then a beast designed to kill starts to kill. He lunged at me. Shrouded by the darkness of the night, I embraced him with violence. There was no escaping this if I wanted to make Serengeti my new home. I needed to confront the pride living here sooner or later. And tonight will make the dynamic between the apex predators living in the same land. I was not afraid. All this time, the only reason I was not paying attention to him was because I was making sure he was really alone. And guess what? He was alone. At this point in my life, I fear no lion on equal ground. Imagine the roar of an engine. Now make it alive and angry, with a little bit of savagery mixed into it, like the creature that made it was a mindless beast. Maybe then you would get close to creating the sound of a raging lion. When two killing machines both weighing around 200 kilograms clashed to kill each other, it was a scene straight out of fantasy. For people who were awed at humans fighting, the fight was almost impossible to comprehend. It was nature's finest showdown. Our bodies clashed with the weight of thunder. Dust exploded beneath us as we struck each other, claws raking fur and teeth searching flesh. But while my opponent was more focused on clawing and biting, I focused on pushing him. My powerful hind legs, which had grown incredibly big and explosive to make up for my lack of long tail, showed their superiority in full display. It was nature to take one thing and give another. I might lack supreme mobility, but I had sheer explosive power. He released a roar of surprise, his eyes opening wide at my unexpected strength. I drove him backwards, his claws skidded on dirt and rocks. His back paws scrambled for purchase, but my strength made his attempt futile. Eventually, his legs gave out and he crashed to the ground. A resounding thud silenced the surrounding and he was disoriented. I took that opportunity to finally bite at the side of his neck. My jaw clamped down on mane and skin. A lion's skin was not attached to the flesh, which made it flexible and almost impossible to tear through. But when I tugged roughly, he released an agonizing scream. His scream didn't result in his defeat though, it only worked to anger him more. He quickly rolled on his back and his hind paws caught my face. His claws sank into my face, and if I didn't let go, he was going to tear it away. I released my bite and jumped away. That gave him enough time to get back to his feet and lunge at me with even more aggression. Roar. I ducked under his swing and slammed my shoulder into his stomach. His jaw immediately clamped down on the back of my mane and he thrashed violently, tearing my mane and causing sharp pain. I speared him onto the ground and then we rolled in a tangle of claws and teeth. The grass buckled and we kicked up dust in our collective struggle. We were like a ball of fury as we did everything to hurt each other. Strangely enough, I quickly found myself beneath him. This was unexpected since I thought I was stronger than him. But in a rapid fight driven by instinct, his experience shone and put him on top. He pushed me on the ground, claws sinking into my skin, and then he roared in front of my face. His yellowish fangs were extremely sharp. It almost made me second-guess my decision to fight him. He had fought before, that much was obvious. The only experience I had was fighting against Scar. On the other hand, it seemed like my opponent had seen hundreds of wars. And he probably did. He was a Lion King in his prime. He was unlike Scar, who became king because there was no other candidate. The lion in front of me had earned his title in blood and conquest. His jaw flew down and they snapped right beside my cheek. My mind worked fast, focusing solely on the fight. I threw my paws up and grabbed him by the back of his head. Then I used that as a way to control his head. Whenever he came down to bite me, I guided it away from his target. I managed to defend against his flurry of attacks, and when his paws slipped down from my chest and onto the ground, I rolled and got back on my feet. Then I pushed myself up with all my strength. I easily stood up with him on my back, and then I threw him down from on top of me. He landed with the grace of a cat but no longer attacked. I expected you to fold quicker, but I see now that you have some fight in you, he said and circled around me. I did the same and we both walked in circles, taking another assessment of each other. We both underestimated each other heavily. He did not think a young lion like me would be able to clash on equal ground with him, and I did not think his experience would make much of a difference. It seemed basing other lions on Scar was an insult. Scar was pathetically bad at fighting. "What is your name?" he asked. "Leo," I answered. "And you?" "They call me King Ruko, the Thinker," he said and then stopped circling. His body faced me once more, ready to start the battle again. "You are a worthy challenger," he said, and then he pounced at me again. I smiled at his declaration but also smiled at something else. His cautiousness had made him pause the battle to reassess me, but that did not only work for his benefit but for my own. You should never give the lion with a human brain time to think and strategize. He came at me with a roar, his body wrapped in fury, and he feinted a lunge. And instead of coming up, he went low. He disappeared under my swing and his head slammed into my stomach. His jaw aimed for my inner legs, which were more vulnerable than the outside. It was a great strategy that showed off his immense experience. Experience taught him how to fight well even though he might not think. It would have worked on any other lion but me. I quickly dropped my lower legs down and put my weight on his head like I was defending a takedown. I gave a growl and wrapped my arms around his body. My claws sank into his lower belly, acting like an anchor. And then my hind legs exploded and I pulled his body upwards. I heard him release a grunt of astonishment as he soared and flipped in the air. I crashed him on the ground. Perhaps it was the first time in the history of nature that a lion was body slammed. If I fought like a lion, his experience would win him the battle, so I stopped fighting like one. It was like shifting the battle from boxing to karate when my opponent was a world champion boxer. I knocked the air out of his lungs by crashing him on solid ground. I immediately rushed at him to take advantage of the opening. I feinted, aiming for his jaw, and his body reacted on instinct. His hind legs came up once more to tear me away, but I quickly pulled back without biting him. I learned from the first time. That's what's so dangerous about me. The same trick wouldn't work twice. I'll adapt. His hind legs lashed at the air, and instead of lunging at him, I swung down my paws at him. My ripped shoulders rolled to produce force, and then my giant paws smashed his head on the ground. I was not clawing but slapping. I hit like a tiger and not like a lion. His body trembled like it was caught by electricity. And then finally I lunged at him and bit the side of his face. My teeth disfigured half of his face and ear. I dragged him using all my strength towards the rocky ground, and then I smashed his head on the rock. A crack resounded. I was not sure if it was the jaw, the cheekbone, or the skull, but something cracked. But contrary to my expectation, that seemed to rile him up more. He moved with fury and got up to his feet faster than I expected. Perhaps it was adrenaline. Ruko slammed into my side with enough force to make me fall and roll over. He threw himself on top of me, but I did not allow him to mount me again, so I rolled using his own momentum. My claws attempted to tear his shoulder, and I clamped down on his neck. He roared in fury and twisted violently. His paw slammed on the side of my head, making my ears ring, and then his claws tried to move my ear to my cheek with his grip. I growled and retaliated by opening my jaw and taking in a bigger bite at his neck. We rolled on the grassland once more. We sprawled around like beasts at war. The pace of the battle was now too quick for the mind to follow. I tried my best to not give in to my instinct. An animal instinct was sharp and dangerous, but it was a weakness for me. A sharp mind wins battles, not the instinct of a savage. I struggled to strike a balance between a clear mind and instinct. If I tried to think before attacking, it was too slow and came too late. If I attacked without thinking, my attacks were useless. Lions had evolved to fight other lions, so it was hard for both of us to inflict serious damage. We moved across the grasslands like angry forces of nature. Adrenaline pumped in my veins, giving me power I did not know I had. But the longer the fight went on, the better I got, the stronger I got. I struggled to find the balance between instinct and clear mind, but as the battle progressed, I was starting to strike a balance between them. At one point, it was no longer just a fight for me but a lesson. I started learning from the older and more experienced lion. The price was blood, but that was worth it. I started realizing my advantages and disadvantages. One huge discovery I made during the fight was just how strong my opponent was. And I meant that more than you would initially expect. The thing was, Ruko was an incredible fighter. He had immense experience under his belt and his body was at its physical prime. I was only slightly heavier than him. I was not even stronger. Sure, I had more muscles, but he made up for it with matured strength. So we were basically equal in power. There was no reason for me to be able to fight with him. It was illogical that I was able to contend with him. A young lion against a prime king was akin to a boy against a man. But I stood there, on equal ground. At first I thought it was because of my human mind, but it was not just because of that. I realized this when my mind was out of the equation during the fast-paced battle and I relied on instinct. Even without it, I stood and fought still. I was not beaten at all. And all of this was because of my build. My unique build that stemmed from a lack of tail. A body that compensated for what it lacked. I moved differently compared to a lion. I behaved differently from others. My actions did not begin nor end at the same place my opponents did. I was not your generic lion. I knew this. I intentionally made these changes to adapt. But I never realized the full consequence until now. I was a completely different beast in lion skin. So it didn't matter how much experience Ruko had fighting other lions when I did not fight like them in the first place. I was new, I was different. His experience was nearly void. It seemed like I was a beast solely made to kill experienced lion kings. Something forged to win wars. And I didn't even realize it. But when I finally did, something changed in me. My mind cleared up, no longer blinded by adrenaline to survive the situation. There was overflowing confidence in my actions, one that rivaled a king when I was still nothing. I growled, deeper and louder than I ever did. And then the tide of the battle changed swiftly in my favor. "Is this your tail?" I asked while I slipped under his lunge and came out beside him. "Must be nice," I said, and then I crushed that shit between my teeth. He roared in agonizing fury, his paws spiraled, searching for something to tear, and his teeth also clamped shut in search of something to bite. But he never found my tail. I tugged at his tail and dragged with a grin. My first goal was simply to fight him off, but my confidence set a new one. If I killed him today, it would be much easier to take over the pride with 2 kings than 3. So I told him, "I'm gonna kill you today." He roared in retaliation. I acted on bloodlust. This part of the battle was just a straight-up assault on my part. I was raping the poor king, metaphorically of course. Roku tried to claw himself away from me, and when that didn't work, he tried crawling away. His claws, meant for tearing his enemies, anchored on the ground and created lines in a futile attempt to escape. Like a woman scratching the sheets. And yes, I took joy in disrespecting him like that in my mind. My jaw clamped down on his tail like a crocodile. There was no slipping away unless he pried my jaw open or tore off his tail. I wouldn't let him go as long as I had teeth. I tried to tear off his tail. I knew firsthand how hard life becomes when a lion loses his tail. I was a young cub and could adapt as I grew, but if a full-grown lion lost a tail, that might just be the end of him. We engaged in a sort of tug-of-war where Roku struggled with all his might while I tried to pull off his limb. I dragged him on the grassland, trying to ragdoll him, but I was not quite successful. Roku was not like Scar, so although I dominated him, he was powerful in his own right. The only reason I had the upper hand was because of the situation. He was rock and I was paper. He surpassed me in almost every other attribute. We stayed like that for a while. I was the aggressor, and he was the victim. While I had his tail in my jaw, I clawed at his back, kicked at his ribs, and slammed him more than once. It was like a small boat trying to stay afloat amid a raging ocean. And in the end, Roku was able to bear my assault and remain fighting. I was starting to get tired. We both were tired, but it was worse for me purely because I ate as much as I could not long ago. Anyone who has had a hard workout right after eating would understand my situation. There was still huge, undigested meat in my stomach that was hindering my performance. It might sound out of pocket, but that was what battles looked like in nature. All factors were at play. It was not just about the fighters. I quickly realized it was not good for me to keep engaging in the tug-of-war. I had left enough injuries and bruises on my enemy, so with great reluctance, I released his tail. A lion's teeth were made to pierce and tear, not cut, therefore, it was not that easy to get his tail. Roku moved away immediately, as if I was a plague to be avoided at all costs. I thought he would run all the way with how quickly he bolted out, but he didn't. He had more dignity than Scar. He stood a few meters away from me, and we locked eyes. We both panted, equally exhausted, but there was still tension between us. His lips peeled all the way back to show his rows of sharp teeth. "You really think you can kill me?" he asked with a coarse voice. "You think you can stop me?" I asked back. His peeled lips curved into a savage smile. "Let's see," and then we both moved. But this time we didn't lunge at each other and instead ran side by side along the grasslands. We chased each other, almost like we were chasing prey. The action made a subtle shift in our instinct. It was no longer two lions fighting over dominance, but two apex predators out to hunt and kill each other. We ran, neither leading nor chasing. It was like we were both setting an unspoken rhythm for the next part of our battle. Normally, one would just run around the other lion and attack from the blind spot, but since we both had the same idea, we were in a kind of stalemate where both wanted to play offense. When we moved away from the open plain and reached the tall grasses, that was when the real battle resumed. Roku leapt and dived into the tall grasses. With the expertise of a hunter who slipped through the senses of every prey, he disappeared from my view. I released a growl that had the tone of a roar and lowered my center of gravity to sink into the grasses as well. My wide shoulders made it so that I was effortlessly low on the ground. My belly almost touched the ground as I ran through the grass swiftly. Roku was the first one to attack. He had flanked me from the side, and he leapt out from the tall grass like violence in the shape of a feline. His jaw aimed at the back of my neck, like how lions would aim when they tried to kill prey. I reacted in time. I ducked and rolled before he even reached me. My paws pushed him, and with the momentum of his jump, I threw him to the side. I got up like a spring and ran after him immediately. He tried to move away and dive into the grass again, but I caught up to him in time. I swiped my paws at his back legs, like how I would swipe at my prey to make them off balance while chasing. He stumbled, his injured tail could not work as well as it was supposed to, and he tumbled and crashed on his own. I followed him, and when he stopped, I lunged at the back of his neck. My jaw clamped shut at the empty space where his neck was. He had moved away just in time, driven by pure instinct. His paw slammed on the side of my head, his claws made a line as it crossed my face. I tasted blood with that attack, and that only fueled my rage. I pushed forward, using my skull to headbutt him on his chest. When that landed, I pushed forward and followed up by biting at his mane. I pulled out clumps of fur when I tore away. Roku pushed me off with his hind legs. I was thrown back a few steps, which gave him enough time to get back up on all fours. He ran 3 steps away from me and then turned. He stood up and threw his paw in the air before bringing it down at me. I was in the middle of trying to chase him again and the paw was going to land on my face. My reaction was lightning quick as I turned my head down and the paw slammed on the back of my head. A resounding thud could be heard from the sheer force, and I felt my brain rattle inside my skull. But I simply shook my head, shrugging off the attack like it was nothing. It was an illusion, of course. My body fooled both me and him. I then threw a slap of my own that caught him right at his jaw. I tore off a chunk of his loose lips with my claws. Blood splattered and I bellowed. I aimed low and shot towards his soft abdomen. But before I could do anything, he leapt into the air. I missed him completely and grabbed air while he landed behind me. He tried to lunge at my back, but I turned fast enough to meet him face on. His jaw met my jaw, and the clash of our teeth and fangs sounded like 2 bones hitting each other. We tried to bite each other's faces off, but rows of sharp teeth blocked us. But our fangs were still sharp enough to cut each other's faces as we both searched for our bite. Roku was fighting with raw aggression. One time, our 5-inch canines locked and he pulled with a burst of strength, trying to tear off my teeth from my jaw. A lion that had everything to lose fought more fiercely than words could describe. The clash stopped when I pushed him away with my paws. There was no pause as the fight continued. We fought through the sea of tall grass, kicking up dust and destroying nature in our wake. Our roars shook the silent night. We were breathing hard at that point, and we turned that into growls and a roar. Therefore, the fight was louder and more intense. It was like a great explosion of fireworks before it died. You could see that I was dominating the fight at all times, even though Roku was not helpless either. But in the end, my stamina failed the test of time. I was starting to feel dizzy, and there was an ache in my stomach. My chest heaved up and down while my eyes locked on my opponent. Roku had seen better days. He was bleeding from his jaw, and part of his nose was gone. You could also see some nasty lines all over his body. Lines of skin tore away by my claws. I was not sure what I looked like, but I couldn't look worse than him. One look at Roku was enough to know he didn't win whatever fight he was in. I backed away from him for the first time, and my stomach moved. I couldn't hold back anymore as I vomited to the side. After it started, it was hard to hold back as I vomited more than expected. I shut my teeth, blocking more flesh from pouring out of my mouth. Then I turned at Roku with one last furious glare. "This is your chance," I said through gritted teeth and a face made ugly by rage. "Walk away," and Roku did, but with great fire and hesitance on his face. He picked himself up from the ground one last time, and then he walked away. He was not running away, it was a decision to stop the fight from both parties. I watched him disappear into the darkness, unsatisfied with the outcome. The frustration boiled in my heart, and it came out with a roar. Yes, a roar. The rest of the pride was going to find out anyway, so I stopped pushing down the urge and released a thunderous roar towards the night sky. The sound echoed like a storm without clouds. Once, twice, thrice, and then I stopped when I roared 10 times into the sky. My roar sounded giant and deep, but it still lacked the edge of authority. Roku's shame was walking away in silence. "Damn it. That took a lot out of me," I said while panting in exhaustion. I remained in my place for a long time. I was frustrated, but there was an undeniable pride swelling up in my heart at my performance in the battle. It was similar to what I experienced when I fought off the leopard. But I had no time to celebrate. Things were not looking good for me tomorrow. I vomited so much that I would have to hunt again sooner than expected, and now the 3 Lion Kings were aware of my existence. They might just come out of their way to kill me. I could win in a fight against 1 Lion King, but I was sure to die against 3. I needed to plan carefully about my next move. But at the moment, I was too tired to even think. When my blood cooled down and my adrenaline stopped, I felt exhaustion hit me, and my body started to ache all over. The light that suddenly hit my face did not help either. It was lucky that they turned it off as quickly as they turned it on because I was considering going after them and eating some humans to replace the food I lost. I collected my strength for a while before I headed back towards my cave. I passed the human vehicle on my way. I had sensed their presence since the start of the battle when I searched for lions other than Roku, but they did not interfere in any way, so I just ignored them. Hopefully they took a good picture of me beating Roku's ass. Third POV. Documentary, Episode 1. Name, Dr. T. Somatansan. Role, Lead Researcher and Ethologist. Nationality, Indian, from Nagaland, Northeast India. Age, 62. Would you believe me if I told you that it was never our intention to make this documentary? An aged man said while sitting in front of the screen. He gave off a wise scientist vibe with his well-kept gray hair and formal attire. Although he was Indian, he had Eastern Asian features, as did most of the population in Northeast India. It might come as a surprise, considering the immense fame Leo had gained in recent years, not just among a few people but on a global scale. But our first encounter with Leo, as you will see, came entirely by chance, he said. When we began our expedition in Serengeti, Leo was not even in the equation. The primary objective of our expedition was something else. It was to film and study the 3 kings, he said. The scene showed the crew living in the savannah beside the lion pride that was led by 3 kings. It also showed the kings in question, shifting through the daily life of this massive pride in the Serengeti that had caught the attention of scientists and ethnologists. 3 dominant males, ruling over one of the largest prides in the Eastern Corridor. It was the perfect case study for understanding coalition power, hierarchy, and legacy within lion societies. We learned a great deal from them, especially about pride dynamics and how cooperative dominance functions within such a rare trio, he said, and you could hear the passion in his voice. We were trying to make a documentary about them at the time, and why wouldn't we? We thought for sure that these lions were legends in the making. But our hopes and expectations were obviously destroyed by one single male, he said with a thin smile. Leo, he said. The scene showed a young Leo when he was just 2 years old, which was around the time when the humans first encountered him. The pictures and videos were the first documentation they had in their archive. Leo, at just 2 years old, which was barely a young teenager in a lion's age, was walking around the Serengeti with curiosity in his eyes. He was observing everything in his vicinity as if checking out new land. At such a young age, he was already the size of an average male lion. Although a juvenile, he was already carrying himself with a certain regality. At that age, he was nothing compared to what he grew up to be. His pictures were clearly juvenile when compared to his viral photos that had taken the whole world by storm. But you could see the hint, the foreshadowing of what he would become. Would you look at that? It's hard to believe he was 2 years old at that size. It took us an embarrassingly long time to realize he was juvenile when we first found him. For the longest time, we thought he was a full-grown adult. But then he just kept growing. "Ha ha ha," he said in vivid awe and admiration. His laugh sounded like one of disbelief even now. The scene moved to show the development of Leo over the passing years. How the lion grew more and more monstrous until the photo stopped at the viral image that every people were familiar with. An absolute unit, an impossible beast. Anyway, we will get to that in future episodes. But now let's talk about the beginning of this story, he said, and the scene changed to the earlier photos and videos of Leo, when he was just a teenager of 2 years old. We were already a few years into our first project about the three kings. We had made incredible progress, and the pride was well documented. It was like any other day. Half of the crew had left our camp to film and follow the Serengeti Pride while 4 of us remained in camp, he said. And that's when he appeared. Leo came directly to our camp like a curious cat observing his new surroundings. We never knew of him before, were never aware of his existence. This caused us to believe that this was one of the earliest days Leo spent in the Serengeti region, he said in a knowing voice. Unknowingly, the Serengeti welcomed her greatest king, he said with a wide smile that was excited to tell a tale to the viewers. And Leo found us, not the other way around. Name, Hannah Park. Role, zoologist and big cat specialist. Nationality, Korean American, from Seattle. Age, 34. 10 years had passed since the first time we met, but I remembered the day like it was yesterday, a woman said while sitting in front of the camera. She was a Korean woman with sleek black hair tied in a ponytail. She was in her mid-30s, but she looked like she was in her early 20s, sharing the Asian superpower of looking young even at an older age. You could tell that she was soft-spoken and effortlessly feminine on first impression. She gave off the vibe of the perfect wife who died at the beginning of revenge movies. A few scenes showed her living in the savannah along with other big cats. Her daily life with the crew as they studied the three kings of the Serengeti. It was morning, it was not early anymore, but none of us expected to encounter a lion at that time, especially not when the Serengeti Pride was far away from the camp. Our driver Malik was the first one to see the lion, and the commotion caused me to leave my tent. And that was when I first saw him, she said. At first, I thought it was an ordinary stray male that had stumbled upon our camp. But upon a closer look, it became clear that the lion was not ordinary by any means. Leo was one of those beasts that get weirder the closer you look and becomes magnificent when you understand him, she said with a hint of wonder in her voice. She chuckled. At that moment, I was so engrossed in his appearance that I forgot all my fears. His build was the first thing that struck me, massive shoulders unnaturally developed for a lion his size, a muscular chest that was wider than you would expect and 4 oversized paws. It was not anything odd at first glance. The average person would not notice the difference, and they will simply think it's a lion more muscular than others. But for a specialist like me who studied big cats for years, it was a clear distinction, a remarkable distinction. I learned the reason for his unnatural build when I looked at his back and noticed the absence of something. Leo did not have the long tail that most lions did. Instead, there was a short stub like the tail of a saber cat. And we immediately theorized that to be the reason for his unnatural build and muscularity, she said. It was adaptive hypertrophy. The body increased some things to make up for the lack of another. Tail loss in lions was incredibly rare and truthfully crippling. Without a tail, there was a loss of balance, maneuverability, expression, and many other things. A lion's tail isn't just decoration. The loss of such a vital part of the body should spell certain death, but this particular lion, Leo, had adapted and grown around his traumatic injury. What should make him inferior made him unique and superior instead. Watching him was like watching a living miracle, she said, full of passion. The scene shifted and showed the picture of Leo, but this time it was more focused on his back and his short tail. What people thought to be a defect looked natural on his frame. He had adapted to it perfectly. And when he moved, it was texturally all wrong but looked completely right. He was not moving like a lion. There was a subtle difference that would go unnoticed by the naked eye. His actions were ancient, like something nature had almost forgotten, but Leo revived it, she said. The scene changed to Leo moving around the savannah, and then the screen split to show the movement of a normal lion. The viewers could compare the two beasts, but even then, it was hard for them to notice. The video went into more detail and into X-rays and other CGI to show the difference between the two beasts. It was only then that the viewers noticed Leo's wider paw placement, his lower center of gravity, and the deliberate steps. While the normal lion moved naturally like in a flow stance, Leo's movement looked robotic and almost intentional. Calculated would be the better word. Our first encounter was short, and he didn't stay long. Just sniffed around, gave us all mild heart attacks, and left like it wasn't worth his time. Although we didn't know it back then, we watched history walk past us that day, she said. Name, Malik Adeyemi. Role, second camera, transport coordinator, translator. Nationality, Nigerian-Tanzanian. Age, 41. The screen changed tone. Gone were the polished interviews and academic breakdowns. Instead, it opened with a shaky handheld shot taken from inside the main vehicle, just behind the driver's seat. The perspective showed a paw print. Not a normal one, but enormous, etched deep in the dirt near the truck's tire. Then the camera turned to a black man sitting with one leg crossed over the other, his posture casual. He gave off a friendly charm about him, like it would be weird to see him not smile. Well, hello there. I am out here in the wild, still tracking Leo as we speak, so I can't come to the studio all the way over there in America. The producers insist on including me, so I will give my view, he said in a mild African accent. I don't mean to brag, but I will. I was the first person to see Leo. I was there, sitting in the Jeep and drinking a bottle of water. And then he just walked right into our camp, he said with a wide smile. The scene showed a different time period where Leo was hanging near their camp. The moment was not their first interaction, but it worked to reenact the situation for the viewers. He didn't come in like a lion usually does, you know? He was not loud, not puffed up, not aggressive, but not sneaking either. He just walked towards me, like he already knew what the camp was and who we were, he said. Malik laughed. I am not a smart scientist or zoologist with a master's degree, so I'll just say what I saw. The second I looked into his eyes, I knew Leo was a bit different from other lions. There was no twitching, no wide pupils. He didn't look confused, not as confused as any other animal was when they saw a man or a vehicle, he said. The scene shifted again to some archived video, Leo standing calmly in front of the truck, his golden eyes fixed directly toward the lens. He stared at the camera like he knew what it was. You know how animals usually look through you? Like you're a part of the scenery? He didn't do that the first time we met. He looked at me, like really looked at me. Not like I was danger, nor like I was food. He just saw me for what I truly was. It was very scary at the time, haha, haha, we all kind of freaked out for a moment. Even after he left the camp, we couldn't get him out of our minds. Heck, I had nightmares about him for a few nights after that. But my crewmates would not stop talking about how unique he was and how interesting it would be to follow him and document his life, he said. Many questions were thrown around. How did he get so big when he was imperfect? From where did he come? Was he recently kicked out of the pride, or had he been wandering as a lone lion for a while? How did he hunt without a tail? He should have a problem chasing prey with his build, right? Like any scientist, they were very curious, and they made me drive towards him in the end for answers. If it was any other male lion, we wouldn't have bothered and focus on our real project. But Leo had left us too curious, and that was how we first started to document him.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.